Wake up. It's time for Primal Scream.
Love it.
Dude, sweat.
Swapping it every Saturday. Come join us. Come join us.
I've been wanting to. Hey, welcome back to the Primal Scream. I'm Matt.
I am Todd.
I'm Rock.
I'm Keoni.
Yeah, there you go. We're joined by two awesome people who've been on the show before. Rock, who was on a lot, and then there's been a small hiatus.
He's too good for us.
That's not
He's too
my
good.
choice. I just have not been contacted. What can I say?
That's true. And Keoni was on before, and that was a night where we had to split it in half. We had
we had 7A and 7B.
7A and 7B because
Yep.
we couldn't stop talking about awesome shit.
Killer conversation that
Killer
That's good.
conversation. And I expect nothing but the best again tonight.
Sweet.
I wanted to talk about Keoni's upcoming fight that's going to be on television.
Against T-City.
Is that it? Is it
Yeah.
T City Ortega?
Yeah, Brian T. City Ortega. Is
Right.
his
Yeah.
Okay.
calling.
I'm just not sure what's T-City mean?
Triangle City. He triangles a lot of the people that he fights. He's got a really, really good guard.
Oh,
so that's kind of
okay.
his calling.
Now, is this the guy? And the only reason I even know this is because recently I've been doing this whole Gracie Games thing with my kids. Is he the one that trains with Henry Gracie?
Yes.
He trains in his facility?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, he was just promoted to black belt, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. So he's legit. You know, he's got a great guard. Anybody who gets a black belt from a Gracie knows what they're doing. You know, and that's I got into the sport watching the Gracies compete Hoist in the first UFC. So I have a ton of respect for it. I'm confident that I'm gonna be able to deal with his guard because I've been grappling for a long time. But there are things that I have to be aware of when I'm competing against him, and his guard is definitely one of those things.
Right. Because, I look on your, on SureDog, I look up on your thing, and you're a hell of a submission artist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's your game plan going into this? When you look at him and what his strengths are, when you look at him, what do you think his weaknesses are?
I think his weaknesses, based on what I've seen, are his stand-up. I've got a lot more experience in stand-up. I don't think his top jiu-jitsu game is nearly as strong as his guard game. I think he likes to work a lot off of his back because of his length. Whereas I don't think his top game is nearly as strong. But at this level, when you're competing for a belt, and especially in a promotion like the RFA, which is essentially a UFC springboard, he's going to be good at everything. He's not going to be a slouch at stand-up. He might not be strong at stand-up. He might not be a Jose Aldo, but he knows how to throw a punch, and his punches are still just as dangerous as the next guy. And we've seen that with Weidman and Silva. Is Silva a better stand-up artist than Weidman? Yeah. Did he almost get knocked out twice? Yeah. Did he get knocked out once? Yeah. So in this sport, anything can happen. So I'm not taking this guy for granted at all. I'm expecting he's going to be really tough on his feet. I'm expecting he's going to be really tough on the ground, top and bottom. But as a competitor, all you can really do is put 100% into every single training camp. And so when I walk into the fight, the training camp is so exhausting. Winning and losing isn't in my mind. All that's in my mind is finishing him, is going out there and fighting and trying to finish him. It really is a culmination of 2 months where you're getting in a cage and essentially trying to kill a guy, or be killed. And the ref is obviously, it's not that serious. The ref is there to break that up, but the ultimate goal is to see who would be the last man standing. And so I don't take anything that he has for granted. I'm expecting him to be tough everywhere. And I'm quite honestly, I'm hoping for a war because I've never had one. I've never had anybody really push me that hard.
Yeah, and I've never seen any of his fights. But just seeing that he trains with the Gracies, I expect that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
How hard has it been, or is it hard, running your business, which is Hard Drive MMA?
Mm-hmm.
Is it hard to run your business and train for a fight, or is it easier because that's the situation that you're in every day?
It's really hard, honestly, because if running a business and competing are two different things. I see them basically as two different businesses. On the business side of Hard Drive MMA, I have classes to teach that when I'm nearing competition, this is the first time I've gotten a real serious competition, I have to hand off the responsibility of some of my classes to my fellow teammates and coaches. I don't necessarily like to do that. I like to touch base with the classes that I have and follow their progress. So when I have to be a little bit more selfish for myself and focus on my own training, I don't really like that. More so, I don't like the time it takes away from my family. You know, when I took this fight and I signed with RFA and I got ready for this camp, I sat down with my kids and had a conversation with them and told them, hey, you know how this goes. The next 2 months is not going to be fun. It's going to suck. You know, Dad's going to be training all the time. And because of how serious I look at competition, I have a lot of fun with competition, but I also don't want to lose. I want to know if I go out there and somebody ever does best me, that they're the better man. I don't want to question myself. Did I not train right? Could I have put more into it? Those questions I don't want to ask. If somebody taps me out, if somebody knocks me out, if somebody wins a decision, I want to look at that guy and go, today you were the better guy. You're a better competitor. And kudos to you. Hats off to you. And when I do that and I take that attitude, I obsess over training. And that obsession leads to what I feel is neglecting my kids to an extent. You know, all of their basic needs, of course, are met.
Sure.
I'm not leaving them, you know, at home unattended. But really, I don't get to spend a lot of time with them, and that really bothers me because even though they're accepting of that lifestyle and they're understanding of it, and they, you know, they're in the gym working out all the time too, I don't get that time back.
Now, how old are your kids again, and how many do you have?
My daughter Peyton, happy birthday to her, just turned 11 today. And my son Ronan is 6. He's going to be turning 7. So
that's awesome. So she's Peyton's in the gym working out, doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Not necessarily MMA. They just come in there and they just do all kinds of stuff. They're lifting weights. They're doing pull-ups, push-ups, tumbling. They've taken the classes, but I don't put any pressure on them to do anything. I let them choose kind of their own path. But the great thing is they've been brought up in an athletic environment. So they always want to go to the gym just to horse around, but they're both incredibly fit because playing to them is working out. So
Well, they want to be where Daddy is.
Right.
And they see you doing that stuff. So what a great example that is.
Right.
That's awesome.
When was your last fight?
Last fight was late April of 2013. I fought locally here in Hiawatha, Iowa, and I originally was supposed to fight a wrestler, and that got changed on me last minute. Fought more of a kickboxer style guy named Anatol Grama, who's actually really tough. And I broke my hand in the first round of that fight and was able to get through it and win a dominant decision, even though my hand was mangled pretty good.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah. But, you know, I felt really good in that fight. But to be completely honest, this fight's something completely different. I've approached it as a true professional. At that time, I was just getting ready to leave Aegon, my position at Aegon, but I was still working full or part-time rather. And now I've been able to literally put in a professional camp for the first time. Strength and conditioning, yoga, hitting sauna for rest and recovery, all the proper supplementation, all of the training that I wanted to do at Hard Drive MMA. I've had the support of my staff that's taken classes for me so I could do my. I've never been in the shape that I'm in right now. I feel like I'm truly on a different level than I was.
Now, for everybody who has been indoctrinated in the MMA lifestyle, who have seen, I mean, within the last 10 years, really, truly, with the whole Ultimate Fighter and the UFC and making it really popular on television to watch these reality shows, they say if you're coming in to fight without an injury, you haven't been training.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how have you been with training? I mean, how totally do you have any injuries? Do you feel completely
you know, you have
100%?
You have aches and pains. You always do. And that's 100% true what they say. If you walk into a fight and you don't have a little ache here or a little ache there, you probably aren't pushing it hard enough. And I have a couple of things that are annoying me. My Achilles tendon has been giving me issues. Not in a very serious aspect, but I haven't been able to jump rope as much because it's aching. I took a spill on a plyo box, the high jump plyo box, and gouged a big chunk of my shin out not too long ago.
No good.
Yeah, that's not good.
Throwing kicks with that wasn't very fun. I went up to Rufus Sport, and which is a kickboxing, historically a kickboxing school. They've got a lot of other great people up there in the ground, but throwing kicks, I had to wear a soccer shin guard and a regular shin guard because but that's just the way it is. Is that going to affect my performance in the fight with adrenaline, with a week to rest and really, recover all that stuff? Not really. But yeah, you're going to have aches and pains that annoy you in fight camp. That's just the way that it is. That's the way professional competition is.
Was there ever a separation? I know your brother Eric, you helped train him before he started fighting, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
what was the dynamic between the two of you? Did you want to do it as well? And so, but he kind of launched ahead of you. Obviously, you helped build his career. How'd that work, the dichotomy between the two of you?
Eric was involved in we were both involved in martial arts from a really young age. I was 8 years older than Eric, so he grew up watching a lot of the movies that I watched, Van Damme movies, Seagal movies, all those.
Right.
And he started taking Taekwondo at like 3 or 4, and excelled. He was a natural competitor. He loved to compete, loved to fight. And he got his black belt by, some ridiculously young age, and he deserved it. He was exceptionally talented. He got bored with it after a while, and I had started training MMA after I watched UFC 2. I found it at Blockbuster and was just enamored with the whole style and the Gracies and overcoming strength. And so I started training MMA about the time he was like 15. He was kind of going down the wrong path at school. He wasn't really focusing as much as we thought, he was going to on his academics, and he needed a kind of an outlet or some kind of guidance, I felt. And being that he was a natural competitor, I thought this would be great for him. And the first day he came in to train with me in the basement, it was literally me holding him down with one hand and one knee and just laughing at him. And he's this black belt. He's this very talented striker. But he was not used to being punched in the face. Taekwondo, you don't do that stuff. He wasn't used to leg kicks. He definitely wasn't used to jiu-jitsu. But he had such a strong competitive spirit that it pissed him off. And so he stuck with it. And he hated losing. So he just got better and better and better. And I knew he had a natural talent for it. So he, trained with me for, I don't know how long really, but years and years and years we trained. And for a long time, we trained every single day. And if I had a consistent training partner, of course, it was my brother. We'd get into these long 90-minute, there were no rounds, just 90 minutes of sparring, 90 minutes of grappling, 90 minutes of clinch, hour and a half, just this ridiculous stuff. But he got really good really fast because he obsessed over it. We had, kind of a brotherly falling out for quite a while. And that's when he moved up to Milwaukee and started training with Duke, which I supported. Me and Duke have known each other for quite some time and had a really good relationship. And I thought Duke was a great way for him to get a fast track opportunity, and it turned out that he was. And so now he's training up there full time at Rufus Sport, but he comes back to Hard Drive now. We mended whatever problems we had, and he comes back to train at Hard Drive when he's in town. And I've had the great opportunity to go up there and cross train with the people at Rufus Sport, who've been more than welcome, and I've developed a really good rapport. They're kind of like a home away from home for me. So. Everything's great now. Everything seems like this whole journey's kind of come full circle for both of us, and the timing feels somewhat magical. Now I just got to go beat this dude up and get in the UFC and market ourselves as brothers like the Diaz brothers and the Machitas and all that stuff, and everything will be great.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right.
What a great perspective, too, to think of it coming full circle. I like that.
So with all of your training and everything that you're doing, are you able to keep up with the news, what's going on in the world, anything like that? Because I know you are very political. You have some very strong views about things. And there are
These two guys have strong views about.
I know. I feel like I'm almost neglecting Rock over here. I feel like I'm having a threesome, and I have a really pretty girl, and I have the one that I've been with before.
Oh yeah, few extra times.
Sorry about that. But there's so many really crazy things that are happening in the world right now, like the NOAA bill getting passed at the same time that the whole was it
Duck Dynasty?
Is it Phil Robertson? Okay. During that whole fiasco and craziness and drama, and it's really weird to think that it's hard for me to believe that it's not like, hey, watch what's happening with the right hand while the left hand signs this bill away.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, we've had other people on the show who say, I have so much going on my plate. I have no idea what's going on in the world. Is that kind of how you've been for the last couple months, getting primed for this fight?
No. I think people have a social responsibility to keep up with what's going on regardless. I'm training two times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. Sometimes I take days off, but then I have classes to teach. I can speak on behalf of myself, and I can have Rocky weigh in on this. He has a full-time position as well. I believe that everybody has a social responsibility if they care about themselves, their family, and their community, to pay attention to what the hell's going on in the world. And so, no, I've got a few passions in my life. MMA is obviously a huge one. But another huge one is looking out for people's individual liberties. And I've kept abreast of what's been going on in the world, and I think that's my duty as what some people would call a free citizen, to do so. And I've been very outspoken in my beliefs, and in fact,
Extremely outspoken
to the point where I know that I'm on a list somewhere. That goes without saying.
You have to be.
Probably more than one. I know that I've probably been monitored on more than one occasion. If I wasn't before, my walkout for this next fight is going to guarantee that I will be. There's no doubt about that.
Now, see, I've heard rumors about your amazing walkout.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait to see it because I'm going to watch it on TV and I'm not going to have it be spoiled. Because if I do get this podcast loaded up right away on the internet and people do listen to it, I don't want to give away.
Yeah, well, it's going to be potentially controversial enough that they might not even show it. But it is going to be live. So if they plan on the reason that the RFA one of the reasons that the RFA originally brought me in is because they saw my walkout at Colonel Stadium a couple years ago.
And it was so entertaining.
Yeah,
right.
I came out as Ricky Vaughn, and they're like, "This is the best walkout of all time." And me and Rocky actually and a couple other guys planned that just that week.
Yeah.
And we executed it perfectly, and it was great. And me and Rocky talked about this. We were setting this up for this very reason, so that somewhere down the line somebody would see it and go, "Hey, this guy's a marketer. He's sellable." But this next one is not going to be as comedic. It's going to be a lot more deliberate and politically based and charged, and I could care less. You know what I mean? I don't like to say that I live in a country where a lot of people feel like they are afraid to make such bold statements, but that's where we're at now. We're in a country where the NSA watches everything, listens to everything, uses our taxpayer dollars to spy on us, to spy on foreign diplomats, and I honestly don't give a shit. If they're gonna listen to me and hear me, then fine. I want them to know that I consider them my enemy. I don't like expansive big government creating lists, labeling people domestic threats. I think that's everything that's against the American idea and the principles by which this country was founded. So. I'll have an entrance that's worthy of some talk, I'm sure. I expect to get some boos from, ignorant people, and this will be a hometown crowd, so they're going to boo me anyway. But, there will definitely be a statement being made. There's no doubt.
Now, where's the fights at again? I thought it was in
LA.
It's in LA,
Los Angeles,
right?
Yeah.
How far have you had to travel before for a fight?
I've never traveled outside of my hometown for a fight, but I have traveled numerous times to New Mexico, California, all over the place for other people's fights.
Oh.
I've been doing this for a long time, so this isn't going to be a very, very big change. And this is something I mentally prepared for beginning a couple months ago. You're going to be traveling, you're going to be going. I went through this whole scenario, the whole week, everything in my head a million times. So to me, I've already feel like I've been there. I already feel like I'm there right now. I know what I'm going to eat the morning I wake up. I know all that stuff. It's already planned out. So
Who are your sponsors?
I've got a lot of them. I'll have to look at my phone because I don't want to leave anybody out. But a lot of my sponsors have been really clutch and just recently have really stepped up to the plate. Iowa Bully Mob is a place that actually provided me with a really awesome dog. The dog of my dreams that I wanted a long time ago, but I could never afford.
Is it the dog that I got to meet at your house? At Rock's house?
Yeah, Mocha.
Yeah,
Mocha.
Mocha actually is from 319 Bullies. They're another sponsor of the gym,
okay.
but they're good buddies. They relate to each other very well.
She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, she's a great dog. Hawkeye Fire and Safety is the place that's inside of our building. They just recently picked me up. Knock'em and Lock'em Sportswear, Dr. Bowers, who's a local chiropractor here, Platinum Rose Studio, which does all my awesome tattoo work. They kick ass. Josh Fields and Matt Lucas and the gang have been amazing and made my artistic tattoo dreams come true. Maybe even get something on Rocky someday. What's the first tattoo, Rocky, gonna say?
I'm gonna take the advice of one of my friends, the hater gator Robert Gates, and get a tattoo that says simply "my first tattoo" in the tramp stamp position.
Yeah, awesome.
I thought maybe you'd get like every single NFL football team, and then whoever goes to the Super Bowl and wins, you'd be like, "Yep, that's my favorite."
That's kind of the direct. That was my suggestion. I told him to put something else similar to that, like I'm the #1 fan of whoever's the champion at the time or something like that. But
Barbed
no,
wire. Barbed wire.
Yeah, barbed wire tribal is it nowadays, I think.
Yeah. Max Muscle Sports Nutrition's helped me out a lot. Heat Yoga, the Anvil Gym has been elemental in getting my conditioning through the roof. Ken McClelland over there at the Anvil has been a friend of mine for a long time. I have a barber now. I never had a barber before. I just shaved my head. This guy's taking care of me and making me look at least somewhat kept for the
Presentable.
ladies. Yeah.
Nice.
And you know what's funny? Actually, there's a lady, Trisha Anderson, that just started at my gym about a year ago. She's a romance novelist. She wrote a romance novel about an MMA gym, so she came to my gym to get back study on it and kind of see what the psychology and stuff was.
Wow.
I ended up getting on the cover of this book. Somehow finagled my way onto the cover, so the tattoos and the barber and all that stuff helped me out.
What's the name of the book?
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have to get. I'm gonna put shelves up in this room if we stay here. If we don't move on to something bigger and better, I'm going to put shelves up in this room, and I'm going to start having little pieces of memorabilia. And a little romance novel with you on the cover would be awesome.
I actually have a picture of it here that I can bring up. Of course, the people on the podcast can't see it, but Breaking the Cycle is the name of the book, and there's yours truly, right there, looking seductive.
Damn sexy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hot dude.
Nice.
You know what's funny?
I'll have to throw that on the webpage.
I used to think about. You guys remember Fabio?
Sure.
Of course I do.
I can't believe it's not butter. Fabio was, he made his name with romance novels, and I used to look at him and be like, man, wouldn't that be something to be a guy that everybody wants on romance novels? And then here I am 20 years later. I don't really feel that I'm
novel.
I don't feel that I'm Fabio by any means, but it's just a trip.
Not that you'd want to be a Fabio.
Right. And then my other sponsor that was really clutch is H&H Property Rentals. A friend of mine, Pastor Higgins, has been a huge support of the gym. And it's interesting because we've got on topics of religion before, and I'm not a religious person. I'm not even necessarily a believer, so to speak, but Pastor Higgins has been one of the few people I've ever met in my life that if I could say walked the walk, he definitely does. The guy is Christ-like in his generosity and the way he represents himself, his family, how good he is. And so while I think religion is, generally does a lot of harm and a lot of bad in a lot of instances, this guy really does everything he can to be open, not only very, very generous and giving, but open to other ideas. He knows how I stand and where I stand on these issues, and he's still sponsoring me and supporting me. And I think that says a lot about, somebody's character. So he's been a huge help, not only for this fight, but other fights. And I have to give him his props because he's the man.
That is amazing, isn't it? Because I've only met a couple people in my life who have really been, they didn't even say they were Christians. They didn't say anything about religion, nothing at all. But you could tell by the way they interacted with others when nobody's looking, and they're still being awesome.
Right.
That's a very rare commodity,
and I think that's sad. I think
sad.
With as much as people claimed that their faith leads their lives, I think a lot of it is filled with hypocrisy. And there's a lot of people that talk about I'm a Christian, or they want to represent themselves as a good Christian, but they don't really walk that walk. This guy's just a good guy. He's got a good heart, and if we have a soul, he's got a pure soul. And I'm not sold on religion. I'm not sold on the idea of God. In fact, I've turned some people away from it, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But he is open to the idea of thought, and he has shared with me his experience and why he feels the way he does now. And to be able to say, I'm accepting of your beliefs, but I still have a lot of love and respect for you, and I'm still going to bring my kids to your gym and let them train with you, says a lot about somebody's character. And I haven't met a lot like him before, but he is somebody who I 100% respect because he gives me that respect. And I think, as citizens of the world, all we can do is kind of look out for each other and watch each other's back, which is what I believe America should be doing and isn't doing right now.
He doesn't diminish anybody else, and I think that's probably the bigger thing. Because I have an aunt who's the same way. She and her husband are big fundamentalist born again Christians, and you would know it from talking to them about it, but you would know by the way they treat everybody else around them. And so my favorite story about them is my uncle was worked in a poultry slaughterhouse for I think almost 20 years, and that's all they did, and they always were scraping by. They lived in the Bay Area, so it was kind of an expensive place to live. they always had an extra bedroom in their house, and they always took somebody in, a runaway, things like that. They brought this girl in. The only requirement they did have was that if they're gonna give you a house and food and all that kind of stuff, that you did go to church with them. You didn't have to believe, but you just went. And so she met this runaway they took in one time. She had a little girl. She met this guy at their church. They started dating and got married, and he happened to be one of the founders of eBay. So my Uncle Keith, who was always like this wannabe computer geek, but never really got there because he couldn't afford to do much. This guy said, "Hey, I'd like to repay you for all you've done for me," and hired my uncle, and he's still working there today, and he made so much money so quickly that he cashed in all his retirement from the poultry factory, and they now go on vacations. And so, I mean, it was like one of those things where when I heard about it happening, I was like, I couldn't imagine having a better people who treat everybody like they expect to be treated.
And again, that's a rare thing because right now, it was on the Daily Show the other night with Jon Stewart, the show with Roger Ross Williams, the book that he just wrote, or I'm sorry, not the book, it was a documentary. It was a documentary or a movie. It's God Loves Uganda.
Oh, right. The homosexuality laws.
Yeah, and what's going on right now is you have this very Christian movement coming from the United States, going to Uganda
and promoting their killing of homosexuals.
And killing the promoting of gay people, and not letting refugees coming into Uganda if they're gay. It's just such a fucking horrible thing. You have a wonderful thing, which is a very rare thing, which is the people that act Christ-like and walk the walk, like what you said, Keoni. But then there's so much of the bullshit and just the epitome of the bullshit, which is right now somebody going, go ahead and die. You're gay. Yeah. So fucking stupid.
It's just like you said, it's just horrible. Why would you just treat another human being like that? I mean, that's the thing, is there's a disconnect somewhere there, that because you don't believe the way I believe, or you don't think how I think, I can just dismiss you as a human being, and what happens to you is no longer important. There's something missing there. And the weird part is too, Rocky were raised Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you?
I was raised Methodist and then went to a Catholic school just to have sex with the girls.
I knew that was going to happen. My wife was raised Catholic. Were you?
No, my parents were actually Baha'i, which not a lot of people don't know about the Baha'i faith. It's a fairly modern.
I've never heard of Baha'i.
Really?
Never heard of it.
Well, as an adult, you get to make a choice as if you're going to stay in the faith or not. Don't they leave that up to your decision at some point?
Right. Yeah, but the thing is with the Baha'i faith too. You're still brought up in a situation where you're surrounded by other Baha'is, and regardless, and this is probably controversial for my mom to hear me say this, but regardless, you're still framing your psychology around a certain religion. You know what I mean? At a very young age, when you're very impressionable. So, yeah, do you get to make a decision? Sure you do. But that's not really saying much when you've been brought up your entire life to believe a certain way.
Right.
When we're talking about religion, one point that I really would like to make is, it seems like people reach a point in their lives where they need something to guide them. You know what I mean? They need some kind of greater purpose. A lot of people look to religion. I look to mixed martial arts. If I didn't have MMA in my life, I don't know where I'd be, or fitness in general. But in the case of, some of the Christians that I've met that really kind of walk the walk, they were in a really, really bad spot, mentally, psychologically, physically, whatever, just in their life, where they were in a very, very low place. And they needed something to give them hope. And because of whatever stroke of luck or timing or coincidence, or what they would maybe consider divine intervention, they found their faith. And that's what led them to become better people. And I think if you really are a survivor, and if you're really a strong person, you'll find something that you can center your focus on and turn you into a better person. That it can be religion, it can be really anything, but I think a lot of people cling to religion just as kind of a behavior pattern, and then they allow the man, the injection of men telling them how to determine what the scripture means, into things like Uganda, where you walk around preaching this message of love and acceptance, but then on the flip side of this coin, you're willing to preach that gay people should be murdered. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but the people that I feel like the people that find faith in religion and find a way to turn themselves around could do the same with probably a lot of other things. It just happens to be a matter of indoctrination or circumstance that leads them there. Now, in the case of my friend Pastor Higgins, he was in the same place, very low place. A few things fell into place where he found his faith in God, and that's what he says delivers him to a better place. And he's definitely in a better place, and he definitely walks the walk. And, I'm not a religious person. I would never necessarily recommend somebody to religion, but he is open enough in his beliefs that I would have no problem going, hey, if you're in a really low spot and you really need somebody to talk to help find yourself and to find a purpose in life and to find some kind of love to guide you, I would send them to Pastor Higgins, even though I don't believe a lick in what the Bible says.
Right.
So I think you just have to find whatever positivity you can find in life to guide you. But there's so much dogma and so much hypocrisy in religion that whether it's Christianity or Islam or the Baha'i faith, I think it's really dangerous to wrap all of your convictions and ideals and principles around scriptures and writings thousands of years old, written in times that we can't even relate to. I can't even relate to. I don't, even as a student of history, I can't imagine what it's like to live in a time when, Rocky, give me an example of some crazy stuff in the Bible, some punishable offense you can get stoned to death for.
Shellfish.
Working on the Sabbath, children dishonoring their parents should be killed. Wearing clothes that have a mixture of certain fabrics is forbidden and punishable by death. The list goes kind of on and on if you want to look at the Old Testament.
Yeah, and Rocky's a better, authority on the...
Yeah.
Really? Wearing clothing that are of the wrong fabric?
Yeah, I can't remember the two fabrics, but you're not supposed to mix two certain fabrics together in your clothes.
Was one polyester? Because that's a staticky
One was
motherfucker.
cotton, I'm pretty
Well, I mean, that's just a perfect example because it's obviously written by men who have certain agendas and certain ways of looking at things, and that point alone for me is the part that I have a hard time buying into. And Matt and I have a connection with the idea of religion too, because I found the exact thing you just said. Found myself at a very low place, didn't have a lot of support, didn't know what I was going to do. I think I was divorced at that point.
Yeah, you were divorced.
So I was really, really struggling, and I found myself feeling like a fraud because I really dove into this fundamentalist church, and I really loved the people. I still have wonderful memories of the people that I hung out with, the fellowship that was involved, the singing, all the things that he and I together got involved in. Really, to this day, I loved. But I did at the time feel kind of fraudish in the sense that I didn't really believe.
Well, yeah, because after the sermon every Sunday, we'd get together and we'd sit at Panera and be like, all right, so what do you think of the sermon? Well, I thought 80% was bullshit, but I really liked the music.
Well, and I think that's an important point. I watched a documentary recently called Happy, and
that is a fantastic documentary.
And it dives into what drives happiness, and the kind of the consensus of it is social relationships and the people around you. Now, if I'm in a really, really bad place in my life and I feel down and low and alone and I feel like a piece of shit and I'm no good, and a congregation of people, even you guys, if you guys bring me in here and you say, hey, you know what? You are a good person. You're capable of great things. We accept you for who you are. That's going to make me feel good. It's going to make me feel almost spiritual, I would think. I would presume. And I think that's what religion a lot of times does. It's the social connections are very, very positive, and it can bring people out of a bad place just for no other reason than a sense of community. But the scripture and a lot of the rules and regulations and the teachings and the actual application is completely horrendous and heinous in the way that it's implemented. So you have on a very, very small social level, exceptionally positive things going on a very, very high level or a hierarchy level, horrible, horrible things going on. And I don't think one justifies the other. That's the problem I have with religion is just like if you whisper something into one person's ear on one side of town, by the time it gets to the other side of town, it's completely different. Well, imagine what happens when that happens over the course of 2,000 years, over the course of millions of people.
Sure.
It gets so corrupted that it's ridiculous.
But it's different when God inspires it. Because God can make that word become perfect throughout the generation.
Well, the nice thing is the new Pope.
God, you're good.
He is pretty
You're
good.
convincing me. And
You know,
He's the advocate here.
He hasn't been saying a lot so far, but what he has said,
nuggets of gold.
pretty good.
I'm just saying what a religious apologist might say in rebuttal to what Keoni says, which in my opinion, what I just said is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a way to me, something you can't beat it. You can't beat religion. A lot of times a really, really spiritual or I don't even like to use the word spiritual, but very religious person, you'll never ever be able to defeat them in debate because they'll say, well, it's just God's will. You can't question. You got to have faith, and I got to have faith, but we live in an educated world. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense where we would have all of these things at our resources. And Sam Harris sums it up excellently when he says, why would an omnipotent, all-knowing, all-wise force rely or trust us to believe in him based on horribly bad evidence? It doesn't make a lot of sense. If we're logical, intelligent beings, and we're capable of love, and we're capable of good, why would a God, if he was just and pure and wise, tell us, oh, hey, just believe in this book that was written thousands of years ago and has all of this horrible stuff in it, but trust me, I love you. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And to me, when Sam Harris goes into his lecture on this YouTube video that Rocky showed me with, I think it was a Catholic priest, he talks about the amount of children that die in the world every day of starvation and of murder and torture and horrible, horrible things that happen. And these kids are growing up in places where Christianity isn't even an option. They don't even know about Christianity. And, his point is a God that would allow this to happen is either powerless to prevent it or is allowing it to happen and therefore evil. People have to think about that, and they have to internalize that and question that type of thing and go, does this make a lot of sense? Does it make more sense that this is all a man-made construct to get me to believe in something for somebody else's benefit, or is there truth to this? And I think if you look up into the sky at night, you know that there's a higher power. You know that all of this isn't just, necessarily coming from nothing. There's a source that drives the expansion of the universe. There's greater questions to be answered out there, but to sit on this little tiny rock out in the middle of the universe and pretend like we know all the answers based on this book that was written 3,000 years ago doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem logical, and it doesn't even seem moral, really.
And I think as time has gone on, I think I found myself more and more needing evidence to believe in things. That if I didn't do it personally, if something didn't get accomplished that I wanted to have done, well, it's on me. To have not accomplished that, I didn't do what I needed to do that. And I think, isn't the definition of faith is believing in something without evidence? Right. Well, that just sounds completely. This doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Where would we be scientifically, socially, technologically speaking, if everything was based on faith? We need evidence. We need evidence to prove theory. We need evidence to spur growth. Does it make, would we have gotten to where we got based on faith alone? No, we have to test things. We have to think logically about them. So when people say have faith, to me, that's kind of empty. You know what I mean? I want to know. That's what drives innovation. That's what keeps us humming along.
Finding answers.
Yeah, if I have faith and you don't have faith, then I'm potentially a victim to whatever you want to impose upon me. You know what I mean?
Right.
To me, I need evidence. I need evidence, in a just and good God, if one existed, would give me that evidence without me having to cite a book written by people I never know.
What gets me about it too is, especially in first world countries, I think there's a lot of people who have this idea that there's an all-powerful creator out there who takes an active interest in their life specifically.
Right.
So, for instance, I used to be one of these people, so I can totally relate. I used to think that God guided me in all my decision-making, and if something happened, it happened for a reason. You hear this all the time.
Right.
Well, everything happens for a reason. God's trying to show you something. What path is he trying to open for you now? One door closed opens up another. That type of thing. We think that our lives are so important that there's a God up there or an angel or something guiding us in this life. But if you, like what you just said about Sam Harris just a few minutes ago, take a look at all the horrendous suffering happening in the world. Look at all the people who are living in that prison called North Korea, dying of starvation on a daily basis. In parts of Africa, kids dying of starvation on a daily basis. If there's a God out there and he's taking an active interest in whether or not you're getting the right perfect job, whether you're able to pay your next mortgage payment, whether or not you get the perfect girlfriend next month,
whether or not your NFL team wins,
whether or not your NFL team wins or loses, if God is intervening in those types of problems for people in first world countries, and not in the problems of those suffering and dying on a daily basis in other parts of the world, then we have to admit that we are praying to a God that has his priorities totally out of whack.
Right.
Totally out of whack.
And I think it's convenient when people say things like, I've heard this my whole life and I've always thought it was complete bullshit. Somebody was looking out for me. God was looking out for me because I almost got hit by that car. Well, you know what? Somebody else did get fucking hit by that car, and they're dead. And the only difference between you and them is they can't say that somebody wasn't looking out for them because they're dead. It's circumstances, chances,
Right.
flip of a coin. Every day we make decisions that could potentially lead to our deaths or lead to us going through another normal day. And if I have a close call, I can't attribute that to divine intervention. I can say that I got incredibly lucky, but there was no sign, there was no angel that came down from on high that said, I'm going to imbue you with luck today. Because as much as I want to believe that my existence is that important, that somebody else is watching out for me, I have that perspective because I'm still living and breathing. Somebody else somewhere isn't. And somebody else somewhere is going, where is this God that I believe in? Why has he forsaken me? Why does somebody have a gun to my head? And why are they about to empty a clip into my brain while my child watches? You know what I mean? Nobody wants to think about those things. They want to think about the feel-good things like, oh, well, something allowed me to live another day. Somebody must have been looking out for me. Yeah, that's convenient. You
Right.
know, you don't have to watch some of the horrible, horrible shit that goes on. You don't have to ask yourself the questions like, why did, a few thousand people die in 9/11 and then 2 million plus died as a result of 9/11
Right.
after the fact? You can just, stroll along in your day and justify everything by saying, oh, God has a plan. That's not good enough for me. It's
And I
not
have a
more-
problem too with and my problem is more with probably the idea of heaven, in the fact that I think Matt and I talked about this on another podcast, is that if somebody passes away that's important to me, if I should not, my one form of coping should not be that to deal with my grief is to be, I'm going to see them at another time. I get to be, so I can set my grief aside, so to speak, and say, okay, at a later point, I get to see them again. Mm-hmm. To me, which allows you to disregard somebody who obviously meant a lot to you in your life, and I much rather suffer the pain, suffer the torture of having to deal with the loss of this person not in my life anymore, and at some point celebrate that, instead of always dealing with the coping by saying at some point I'll see him somewhere else, and that's how I get through it all.
It's almost like lying to yourself to avoid the grief.
You know what?
Absolutely.
I'll take that a step further. I think that the idea of heaven justifies you not giving as much shit right now. It justifies people not paying more attention to the moment. I firmly believe heaven, in terms of what people think it is, or what it should be, or what it's represented as in religion or spirituality, could be a place on earth, just like that 80s song said. But people assume that it's not. People assume that, when we die, we're going to go to heaven. So what does that do? It means that I'm not going to pay attention to, and I'm not going to value every single moment that I have right now. And I'm going to put it aside, and I'm going to say, we'll get there someday. We'll get there someday. Well, what if there isn't there? What if there is no heaven? What if heaven is enjoying the moment that you have with your family right now? So yeah, it's a way to deal with grieving, but it's also kind of a way to push off enjoying and taking advantage of every single moment of your life that you are 100% certain that you have your consciousness right now. And to me, that's kind of a scapegoat. It's kind of cheap. It cheapens the value of life by saying, don't worry, you have eternal life. Don't worry about it. Everything's good. In the meantime, just sit at your job and sit in front of this monitor, and you kind of waste your life away because someday everything's going to be great. Well, what if it's not? Then you've wasted a true opportunity of heaven, because when you're sitting on your deathbed and you know that your time is limited and whittled down to minutes or hours, the only thing that you want to do is spend time with your family and be with the people that you love. And that's, to me, when I'm thinking about what am I thinking when my life is coming to an end, that's what I'm thinking about, is I want to spend time with my family. I wish I had more time. That's what you hear about when you talk to people about regret. Well, I spend a whole life assuming or believing that there's going to be a heaven, but what if heaven really is just appreciating every single moment I have now? What if people looked at life that way? Life would be so much more enriched than it is now. And if that's the case, if we just die and we have no conscious awareness that there is no heaven, think about what we're wasting right now. every single moment that we have.
And the interesting thing is Christianity preaches the idea of heaven pretty passionately. And if you look at the New Testament and the Gospels in particular, Jesus actually encourages a very humble life and to live a very poor life on this earth. Blessed are the poor, for they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Also, it is almost impossible for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I think he says something like it's more possible for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. He tells in a couple different instances in Mark and also I think Luke, he tells a man who asks him, "How do I get into the kingdom of heaven?" He says, "Well, follow the commandments, and then that should be good enough or whatever." And then the man says, "Well, I've already done that." And then Jesus takes it one step further. He's like, "Well, if you want to be perfect, sell everything you have and come and give it to the poor."
Yeah, and I think
so you're taught to deny yourself and to live a humble life and to basically live your life. Your life exists for the concern of others, and you're not supposed to do anything for yourself. You're not supposed to enjoy things on this life because you will be rewarded in heaven. What is a short 30 to 40 year lifespan of happiness on this earth if you're not able to get into the paradise that is heaven? That's kind of the idea that is taught by Jesus in the New Testament, and it goes against exactly what you said. Is if we don't have this, if we don't think the idea of heaven is there, then we should take advantage of everything we have here and try to enjoy the experiences that we do have.
And there could be credence to just that, though, because this documentary Happy that I was just talking about not too long ago, a lot of the happiest people in the world are poor. And the reason that they're happy is because all they really have around them is their family. And they don't have this preoccupation with material goods and things and things like that.
Well, and their life has meaning. Everything that they have has meaning to it, because if they don't do something, they're not going to eat. And so every little portion of their day,
gratitude,
has a meaning to it.
And you look at people now, you have Hollywood stars left and right that have millions of dollars. They have everything they ever wanted. They have all the cars of their dreams, the property of their dreams. And then they look around them and they realize that everybody around them, all their social relationships are fake. And they're based on people that want something from them. And then they realize they don't have any friends, real friends, or they don't feel like it. And then the next thing you know, they're overdosing on 13 different medications and drugs on a hotel bed somewhere. Whereas you have these people that have almost nothing. They're completely impoverished, but they have their family. And they're doing whatever they can do to survive. Even though life is a complete struggle and they have nothing, they have this will and this passion to live, and they're happy because of the people around them. So I think there's truth in both different ways to look at it. But I think that a lot of what makes people, or a lot of what people in this country, in westernized countries, think make you happy, which is a bigger house and in a better car. I think that's all just smoke and mirrors. I think that people make you happy, and in being around a lot of positive people that accept you, and then you put people into a place like a church that has a lot of symbolism and a lot of history and a lot of grandeur. I think that's a very psychologically powerful environment that makes people, to an extent, believe, especially if they've been brought up their entire life or through their youth to believe in this concept of God. I don't buy it. I think there's a force driving the expansion of the universe, but I don't think it's some guy sitting up in the clouds going, "I care so much about you." I think it's an opportunity to excel that we're not taking advantage of.
Yeah, think about where we would be if we did not have religion.
Better.
I mean, think about how much sooner would we have started stem cell research without the newborn baby? What was it? Embryonic.
Well, just
stem
think of
cells and
the
freaking out.
control that the Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church had control of when the history of the world was really expanding and changing. They controlled everything. I mean, popes had to crown kings so that the church was part of things. I think it was John V that crowned himself, was the first separation between church and the monarchy. Was unheard of. So, I mean, they've controlled everything for so long that I'd only assume that progress has been stymied at some point.
Absolutely, and they still do, and you can't argue that. You know why? Because if I'm the best candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, and I have all of the lobbyists that I need and all of the corporate funding that I need to get on TV and convince the ignorant masses that I'm the right choice. If I'm an atheist, I'm not going to be the president at this point.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That's all there is to it. You know, I have to.
People are saying that even Barack Obama, they think, is probably not a very religious guy, but he had to get elected.
I think there's a lot of politicians that lie about their faith, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of what Keoni just said, being an atheist almost is a deal breaker for a lot of people. So.
And to me, I mean, and I guess it's probably where I'm at personally, but I would rather have somebody that was like hardcore businessman, knew how to run shit, get things done, efficient, fiscally conservative, and handled things that way than his religious belief and the way he runs his life outside of politics. To me, I just don't give a shit about. It's how can he do the job well? That's all I would care about.
Well, sometimes, you can't really separate your religious beliefs from your policy making, I don't think. For instance, look at our policy towards Israel. And I think that's a direct...
Yeah, why the fuck are they our friends again?
Yeah, I mean...
Why do we back every play that they make?
Because Jesus Christ is coming back, and when he comes back, he's going to land there.
Yeah, basically.
That's it.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason? There's no reason
the fundamentalist born again Christians.
There's no oil. I'm looking at it from like an evil. Like I need something from them. What do they control?
Well, first
is
of
it
all,
only religion?
Let's take a look at why they live in that area of the world in the first place. After World War II, we realized that a major atrocity happened to the Jews, the Holocaust, of course. And in order to
which we didn't even truly understand until the end of that war.
Right. It took some time.
I only bring this up because I watched Band of Brothers, and that's not like it really. It's not like it makes me an authority.
But I watched HBO the other night.
Yeah. But what astounded me from that show, from that series of DVDs that I watched, was it wasn't until the very end. It wasn't until the very end of the war that all of these soldiers, all these American soldiers who were at the beginning of every DVD, the survivors of that unit, said, we didn't even know what was happening to the Jews. I didn't go over there because of what was happening to the Jews. We weren't fighting in World War II because of what was happening to the Jews. We didn't even know what was happening until the very end.
Right.
When we had got to the heart of it, and we basically were marching down and Hitler killed himself. We didn't know until those last few days of what was even happening to the Jews.
It was never initiated.
But that's not how it's sold. It's not.
See, I grew up.
The idea of it. That's not how it's sold to everybody.
See, I grew up in history. My history classes taught me that Hitler was on our doorsteps. That's how I grew up hearing about it. And that, I guess I never heard that it was the last thing we heard about. History in schools tends to be kind of convoluted and all jammed together. I was taught that he was in France. Great Britain was next, and then it was going to be us.
Yeah, right.
So that's why. That's what I grew up learning.
All the way across the ocean.
Exactly.
Not the atrocities. The atrocities never were something that I thought that I was taught that is why we went.
You didn't hear that Wall Street was capitalizing off the Nazi regime. Oh, okay.
Not in high school.
Which you hear about that stuff when it's spoken today. You're like, huh? What? That happened?
They don't teach that the government monopolized
IBM. IBM generated a way for them to count the Jews that they were killing.
Which war profiteering was illegal back then. It's not illegal now. They took that out. That rule is gone now. But it was illegal at one point. That was a bill, wasn't it? That you could not war profiteer. That's ridiculous.
I think it was
war really is about.
Al Franken, I think, was the one that wanted to put that back in before we went to Iraq, I think, or he was elected.
Well, that's what Iraq was really about. Iraq was about war profiteering, and that's what war's been about for quite some time. But on the topic of religion and in the presidency, not to beat around that, but there's a quote from JFK that I remembered that really rang true. And it is, I hope that no American will waste his franchise and throw away his vote by voting either for me or against me based solely on account of my religious affiliation. It is not relevant. And I think that's really important just because we have the freedom of religion and the freedom to believe what we want. What truly is important in this country, in my opinion, isn't what religion we are. It's ensuring that even if you're not the same religion, I'm looking out for your right to be able to practice that religion and not say, oh, I'm necessarily this religion, and we have to have religious freedom, but I need to believe in God. To me, I would rather have an atheist in office that is incredibly focused on making sure I have the right to believe whatever I want, instead of not to count in Catholicism necessarily, but a Catholic in office that wants everybody to be Catholic. I think it's more important, as an American, to look out for each other and our ability to make our own choices, even if we don't agree with those.
Because wasn't that the kind of the goofy fear when JFK was running? Oh my God, we can't have this.
He can't have a Catholic in office.
This Roman Catholic? No, we can't have him.
And he was very adamant about saying, hey, don't vote for me, because I'm Catholic, or against the fact that I'm Catholic. Look at the issues. I mean,
how would that be? I can't even fathom what our political campaigns would be like if that's what, if you didn't hear, and God bless the United States. I mean, if you just removed religion completely from.
Well, think about the Republican debates before this last time, when they had a gay soldier on the screen say, I'm fighting for my country. I just came out to my parents," or whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was. And yeah, there were boos, and not one single one of those people said, Thank you for your service, or anything like that. It was right away the religious part of the sexual aspect of somebody being gay. You and I had the same thing happen in one of our Bible study groups back in the day. I would say to these wonderful people.
Well, we got accused. We got asked.
Yeah,
you're gay. You guys are gay, aren't you? Are you gay for each other?
I would get so pissed. And I say, listen to me. I love him because he's really important to me in my life. It doesn't mean I want to have sexual relations with him, but I do love him like a brother,
like Jesus told us to.
Yeah, and I said, what's the big deal? And they were adamant. It's just the sex. They all said that blatantly. It's just the sexual aspect of homosexuality. Loving each other is not an issue. It's
Well, the whole religion thing, because religion colors every opinion that we have in the media, in politics. Just recently, or it's big news that, was it New Mexico? New Mexico made it legal now for doctors to help with doctor-assisted suicides.
Right.
What do you think Kevorkian would be feeling?
Kevorkian would feel like it's a victory.
Yeah.
He would be feeling like the victory, but he was a victim himself.
Yeah.
Because we threw him in jail. Because he was trying to do a very humane thing.
Let's talk about pot, if you want to talk about that. Right now in Colorado, there's people going and supporting their local communities.
Yeah,
they're sold out.
Yeah.
they're out of pot.
They're peacefully supporting the free market for a similar situation. And a year ago, they'd been thrown in federal prison.
In my opinion,
and taxed 30%.
They're doing it all wrong in Colorado. I think right now you're seeing everybody rush to Colorado and buy the marijuana because it's it's such a new thing to buy it legally and smoke it legally that people are willing to pay whatever they want to charge for it. Because, like you were saying, the taxes are 30%. Mm-hmm. So that makes it so that the free market or the black market is still going to be alive and well. And anytime you make something that overpriced as to what it would be in a normal market system, you're going to have a black market where it's people can get it cheaper.
But eventually, when more states are accepting of it and make it more legal,
DC is next. Supposedly, DC is going to decriminalize it.
But Rocky, I know where you're going with it. Keep going with it.
I was just going to say that the black market will survive, will thrive, and if more states do latch onto this idea of legalization, then I think they're also going to see a revenue generation opportunity, just like Colorado does.
And they're not going to want to go less than the.
They're going to also apply the taxes, but what's going to happen is when you keep the black market alive, then that's where the gang or drug violence comes from. Because when you have a black market and one party does not uphold another end. His end of a contract, they can't take it to the courts to dispute it. So how do they settle their disputes? With violence. That's where drug violence comes from. Those who can wield violence the most effectively becomes the top dogs in the market. And so the problems are still going to persist with because of these high taxes on marijuana, because it's going to keep the black market alive.
Yeah. Todd and I were talking about this before you guys showed up, before we hit record. The fact that we don't have shamans, because we don't have anybody that guides any of the young people or older people, anybody with the proper use of any drug, whether it's over the counter. I mean, we have pharmacists, but fuck, there's so many side effects to these over the counter drugs anymore. But we don't have anybody say, okay, let me show you how to do it correctly. Let me put you in a safe place. This is how you do it recreationally, to do whatever. Because we don't have that, it's always going to be misused because we demonize it, right?
And we fear it. I mean, we've been raised to fear it.
I mean, one of the things lately is because because Todd and I love the Joe Rogan podcast because we just listen to it all the time, and he's such a proponent for marijuana, for hallucinogenics,
or for legalizing
MDMA,
anything.
Yeah, for legalizing all that stuff. Ayahuasca. It's made him and I both want to try these hallucinogenics. Now, ayahuasca. When you listen to
Graham Hancock.
No, I was actually going to say when you listen to Robin Quivers, right? Robin Quivers from Howard Stern show, when she talks about her ayahuasca trip when she went down to, was it South America?
Peru.
I'm sorry, Peru. When she goes down to Peru and she does the whole ayahuasca thing, it doesn't sound like it's an enjoyable fucking thing. You're vomiting and you're shitting yourself, but it was a profound thing for her once she went through the whole thing. But if you didn't have that shaman, which she had, and said, this is what you're going to see, this is what's going to happen to you. I think it was the third trip that she was on, the second or third trip that she was on, and she's seeing lights, rainbows and unicorns or whatever it was. And he goes, "No, you're doing it wrong. You got to get through that. There's somebody guiding you, So when she came back, she was profoundly changed. Her idea of what reality is or what is meaningful had been changed. How many young people in the United States has anybody to guide them?
Well,
because we've made it illegal.
Who's guiding them now are people that are profiting from it. You know what I mean? The people that are guiding our use of drugs in this country now make billions of dollars on it. And when we're talking about marijuana, me and Rocky talked about this right when legalization took place in Colorado, and there were 2 states that said, hey, we're going to run with this. I said, hey, this is the beginning of a domino effect. And here's why. States are going to see, what does everything come down to when it comes to the market in business? Money, the almighty dollar. States are going to see the profitability in not only lowering the amount of ridiculous people that for the last 70 years have wasted their entire lives away and destroyed their families sitting in jail for victimless crimes and nonviolent crimes. But they're gonna see the savings of incarceration there. They're gonna see the taxation capability, and states are gonna start flipping like dominoes, not because of any great moral stance, but because of money. In 5,000 years of recorded use, the CDC reports not one person has ever overdosed or died because of marijuana. 400,000 to 500,000 people a year die from tobacco. Tobacco is perfectly legal. It's perfectly taxed. Now, the government is protecting us from ingesting or taking a plant that grows out of the ground that does not kill you and cannot kill you. It's been demonized for the last 70 years. It's been used to fund Mexican drug cartels. There's nothing good about having marijuana illegal. And to Rocky's point with the black market, if you're going to tax something at 30%, one thing we know about taxes is if you tax something now, you're going to continue to raise taxes on it later. These states that decriminalize or legalize fully, they're going to tax as well. And eventually they're going to see the profit from this and go, oh, we're going to have this option to up the taxes to 31%. Eventually what happens is it becomes more lucrative to grow this stuff on a black market, which means now what? You're committing a crime, right?
Right.
We can put you in jail now because you're not doing this under our regulation. When that happens, then you have people willing to kill each other because there's absolutely no regulation or oversight. What we're talking about here is a plant. We're not talking about, I could go to Hy-Vee and I could buy Drano and start taking shots until I killed myself. Perfectly legally. I cannot grow a plant in this state without going to prison. In Colorado, I can go buy it at 30%, but eventually, if they continue to raise taxes, or even if they don't, there will be a black market. If there's a black market, you see, just like prohibition in the 30s, the rise of organized crimes. You see Mexican drug cartels who don't want legalization, because if legalization happens, they'll be defunded. The drug laws create crime. There are more people that have died because of drug-related violence than would have ever been saved from overdoses. So what this really comes down to is personal choice and education. Am I going to go shit my pants and puke if I drink ayahuasca? Fine. That's my choice. Nobody has in my opinion, nobody
should have the right.
Yeah, nobody should have the right to say, even if this is horrible, don't do it, because this is my life. I was born, it was entitled to me. I can put whatever I want into my body. Especially in this case, cannabis has been shown now just recently in all kinds of studies all over the place to have cannabinoids that destroy cancer cells. There's a very, very obvious and very, very corrupt reason why this has been illegal for so long and demonized for so long. But this is a plant that grows outside in a natural setting anywhere. It's got tons of medicinal uses. And there's absolutely no reason, A, it should even be regulated, and B, it should be taxed. It should be 100% legal, just like sage, just like oregano, just like any other herb, but it's not, and there's definitely a reason for it, and it is because of money. If you want to rack up fatalities, alcohol, 80 to 85,000 people a year die. And we know what alcohol does. Alcohol is horrible. Should people be able to drink it and get drunk and be stupid? Sure, that's free choice. I'm not trying to limit it. I don't agree with it. I don't drink it, but it's their choice. Should people be able to smoke cigarettes? Stupid. Killed my grandparents. But should I be able to tell you or you that you can't smoke it? No, if you want to smoke yourself to death, that's natural selection. If you don't learn from history, become a victim of it, I'm going to continue my life being an intelligent person making intelligent decisions. But marijuana is at the very, 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 very bottom of this list with 0 fatalities. So even if my kids decide at 14 years old to become a huge stoner, I don't have to worry about them ODing in some ditch. You know what I mean? Right. I have to worry about them eating a bunch of pizza and laughing a bunch. And is it positive? I think Ron Paul said it best. I don't think it's a great idea to do it, but I'm in no place to tell you what to do with your life. And my problem isn't with necessarily even legalization and taxation, because that's more free than what we've had for the last 70 years. There's people that have wasted away their entire lives because of pot. You can't sit here and tell me that a person sitting in prison for a lifetime because of the 3 strikes and you're out rule, because of a plant that exists naturally in nature and cannot kill you, is just. It's completely unjust. It's immoral.
What happens? I wonder, Shirley, I mean, this is a good question, I think. What happens to the people that are in prison for life in a state if that state all of a sudden decides, it's legal?
Right. Well,
are those people released?
No, probably not unless it's written into law. But here's the problem. Our prisons are inundated with these people. There are probably...
I mean, they're the moneymakers.
Yeah, there are probably millions of people that privatized prison in the last 30 years has exploded because of nonviolent criminals that are being pushed into prisons with rapists and murderers and all kinds of the most horrible shit you can imagine. You have people that are responsible parents that smoke a joint once a night getting raided with an ounce or even a half a pound of this plant and going to prison for 15 or 20 years, destroying their entire family, being put in prisons with people they should never be in prison with. And to what benefit for society? Now we have millions of people in prison. So if you let them all out, there's no jobs to sustain them. If you keep them all in, you're basically immorally affecting people's rights and freedoms by keeping them in prison. So we've got this, just like we have a military-industrial complex, we have now a privatized and almost a federal prison complex that has so many inmates that are in it that shouldn't be in it. If we let them all out, we're going to have a huge fucking problem in itself.
Right.
But we almost have to if we consider ourselves moral people. Do I give a shit if this kid over here or this guy over here smokes a joint? I honestly could care less. I've smoked pot before in my life. It's not a drug that deserves throwing something in prison. I saw the CNN report with Anderson Cooper. I posted it on my Facebook today. This reporter went and got a contact high in the back of this limo taking a tour around Colorado, smoking all their stuff, and said, I got really, I felt a little woozy and I forgot some of my questions and I was hungry and I was laughing. These people, one of them was a grandmother that had smoked for 30 or 40 years, under the threat of police violence, could now smoke openly. Nope. Where was the crime being committed? Where were people being hurt? Where was society being scourged? They were actually giving to their local free market. 1 year ago, the feds, their local police would have justified putting these people in prison. You know what I mean? While we're handing out 4 or 5 year prison sentences to pedophiles. Get the fuck out of here. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, drug laws, I don't care if you want to go out and party it up and shoot something into your arm, you know, or snort something, that's your choice. Not a good choice, but it's your choice. And if you don't know drugs are bad by now, no law is going to stop you. Never has, never will. We saw it in the 30s when they tried to prohibit alcohol, and what happened? Organized crime exploded. And they had to eventually get rid of it, and they had to do away with prohibition because people like Al Capone were murdering people in the streets. It never works. It never will work. Whenever you tell people that they can't do something, you're gonna get bad results.
Well, how come we don't still have organized crime and from that resulted from prohibition of alcohol?
Right.
Well, we repealed the prohibition of alcohol, and so therefore that all ended.
Well, we created. I mean, people learned how to be criminals and gangsters from that time period, and then they just rolled it over into other things. Sure. Whether it was being a bookie and gambling.
Well, I guess my point,
or whatever.
My point is, since it was illegal, it was criminalized. Alcohol was not legal to drink. Therefore, the black market emerged. And how do people in the black market settle disputes? With violence. And that's where the same situation we see with drugs being illegal. We see drug violence because that's how they settle their disputes. They can't go to a court of law and have their disputes settled there. They just have to do it on the street the best they can.
There's an obvious inherent legal risk in dealing with pot or dealing with coke or any of these illegal drugs because they're illegal. So when you have something that's illegal and outside of the public eye or in the black market, what happens to the price? It explodes. You end up paying, I don't even know how much for an ounce of a plant that if I could grow it in my backyard or you could grow it in your garden would be worthless. If it was perfectly legal, there would never be Mexican drug cartels or inner city youth willing to kill each other over it. By making it illegal, you create millions of criminals as soon as that law goes into effect. And that's where freedom, in my opinion, gets inhibited.
We talked about this. I don't know if it was the last podcast or the podcast before that, but why have we just given the right? Why do we just expect that the government is going to tax us on anything and everything, like growing a plant?
Sure.
I can put water on a seed, plant it in the earth, water on the seed, the sun hits it. Why is it that the government has a right to tax me for what I have just done?
They don't.
Because they've planted that into our brains. They've implanted it.
That's just it. Right there.
Right.
Well, think about how ridiculous it would be, considering that in specific marijuana has never killed anybody in known history. Not a single person. You can't overdose from it clinically. They've tried. It doesn't work. Think about the same thing. Tomatoes. Think about if the government came out tomorrow and said, "Hey, we're regulating the growth of tomatoes, and all of a sudden, to get tomatoes, you have to go on a black market." Yeah. It would happen. People would pay for tomatoes on the black market.
Gotta have that salsa.
They would be criminals to get those tomatoes. But think about how ludicrous it would be. We're talking about the same thing. Does it have a mind-altering effect? You probably have to eat a lot of tomatoes for it to affect your mind. But
I'm pretty happy when I eat salsa.
But there is a reason why there's a reason why this stuff is illegal, and it's completely ludicrous to have a non-lethal herb or plant made into a substance that's demonized to a degree where we're willing to put people in prison for years. And a lot of this comes from the Just Say No campaign to drugs, where they didn't have anything on pot.
Thank you, Mrs. Reagan.
Yeah, so they did these clinical trials where they put these masks on monkeys. I don't know if you guys heard about this. They pumped them full of pot smoke, so concentrated that these monkeys died. And it wasn't because they were high. It wasn't because of the pot smoke. It was because they were asphyxiated. There was so much smoke being pumped into their lungs that they actually choked to death because they couldn't get any oxygen. And then they went, see, look, the monkeys died. It's horrible for you. And not only that, it's a gateway drug. Well, guess what? If it is a gateway drug, which in my experience with all of the potheads and the casual smokers that I've known in my life, and I've known a lot, it's not. Most of them smoke pot. They've smoked pot for years and they never touch anything else because they like to smoke pot. But when you put it on a black market, and you put it on the black market with drugs, pharmaceuticals, prescriptions, other illicit drugs like coke, What are you doing? You're lumping all of these drugs into one seller's hand, and you're making it more likely now that if you go out and buy pot, the same person that sells pot might also sell another illegal drug. So you're making it more likely that if kids do try pot, or people try pot, they're also going to have access to these other kind of horrible drugs like meth and things like that. But this whole campaign, just say no to drugs and stuff, it's like, why can't we have our parents teaching our kids the obvious dangers of abusing anything? Like, I don't know, food?
Well, that's because like that. I think because the culture that we live in right now is so empty.
Yeah, and
it's so empty.
The family's divided. Right
yeah,
now.
You have a divided family. It's an empty culture. You have so many distractions, and I'm no better than anybody else.
Sure.
I try to buy things and think, oh, that'll make me happier, and then I have buyer's remorse. I think I need something, so I get it, and it makes me happy for a week or so because it takes up my time. But is it the most important thing that I should be doing with my day? Is it what it's going to give me the most happiness? No.
Well, I was going to say my mom did a pretty good job because she told me when I was in junior high, and I had tried smoking with friends, as we all try, and coughed my brains out and thought it was the most horrible thing ever. She was talking to me about drugs, and she said, now listen, if you ever want to try marijuana, you need to let me know. And I said, why? She says, because I have friends who have stuff that's okay. It's not laced with anything. It's no angel dust in it or PCP. It's just marijuana. And if you want, I will make sure you get something that is not going to harm you, and you and I can do it together. So all the shit that I give my mom all the time, how wacky she is, that was a pretty nice.
That sounds like common sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a parent that's not been indoctrinated by some fear campaign, but somebody that actually gives a shit. You know what I mean? It doesn't want to see you make a bad mistake, as an immature child and make the right thing. Am I justifying our kids going out there and smoking pot? No. Are our kids going to smoke pot sometimes? Yeah. Are they all going to become huge stoners? No. But I think if you're parenting, which I don't think we have the ability to do to the extent that we used to, because we have two parents that need to work in order to have children now,
right?
Which is an economic, that's part of the economic in the class war that we've had to deal with since the Fed has taken over our banking industry.
Are you saying there's a class warfare?
I know there's class warfare, but I think it's all kind of an illusion. I think that they want you to think there's class warfare, but I think that there's very elite wealth, and then there's everybody else. And I think even very wealthy people that the lower class, which the middle class used to be defined by a one income house. Now I'm in the middle class, and I need two incomes just to be able to have a child and put them into daycare. But now we have this situation where we have this really, really, really elite wealth, and then we have people like I would have grown up thinking, oh, they're rich. They're not really rich compared to the really, really rich. But I think ever since the Fed's taken over the banking industry and our money's been devalued, and the family has subsequently been broken up, and our society's been divided with sports and religion and race and sex and sexism and and sexual orientation and every single division that you can possibly imagine. It's made it a lot more clear for people to identify common sense and to parent their kids. And when you have people being thrown in prison for things like pot, and then you have kids growing up in a broken home because their parents decided to smoke a joint every weekend, you just have the slow deconstruction and division of society on a fundamental level. But they do it over time. So
and I guess you said you don't want to promote kids smoking pot. I almost, in my mind, would rather have a child that smokes pot with his friends than drinks alcohol.
No doubt about it.
I mean, I'd rather have a kid smoke pot. Well, I know that it goes. Trust me, as I say it as the words come out of my mouth,
it sounds crazy.
My brain is going, but wait a second, I've been taught a certain way for so long, and I have to force myself to make sure I believe the correct way. It's kind of weird.
But if you look at statistics, you're 100% right. Now, I know what you mean, because most people would go, "Oh, you're saying that it's good for kids to smoke." No, I'm not. But what I'm saying is the government's provided statistics, the people that tells us that this is something that should be illegal, shows that alcohol, which is legal, and tobacco, which is legal, kill almost 500,000 people every single year. That's what we're really talking about. If you're talking about people staying safe, you're talking about protecting the sanctity of life. They kill 500,000 people a year. Pot kills none. It's not hard to weigh that.
Yeah. And when you put it in the context of this is just a plant that I can just grow anywhere and it really has no effect on anybody at all. I mean, it just makes it sound so benign.
It is.
You know, that it just kind of boggles your mind. And it really, I mean, it's one more example, and I need lots of examples. I need lots of slaps across the face before I get shit. Of
I'll do it.
of how something so benign has been sold to such the extreme opposite of that.
You know, my wife and I we've adopted 3 children. And when we were going through the adoption process of our first child, we had to fill out a form, and it's a form that makes you feel like a total piece of shit as a human being, because you say what you will accept and what you won't accept as an adoptive parent. And one of the things that my wife, who is a labor and delivery nurse, she's a nurse. She's somebody who is certified in the field. She knows what the fuck she's talking about when she gives an opinion like this. When it came to the category of, would you accept a child whose mother had been drinking a lot during pregnancy? We had to go back and forth and debate quite a bit on all of these questions, on what we would accept and what we wouldn't. Like I said, it makes you feel like a real son of a bitch. But she said, I would rather have a child who had been exposed to heroin.
Ooh.
Than a child who had been exposed to alcohol. That's how serious of an effect. That's how dangerous. As I'm drinking this beer. Make no mistake, I am drinking a beer. So, as she said, alcohol has such a dangerous effect on fetuses that it's so profound that she would much rather give the okay for a child that we know who had been exposed, the mother had been exposed to heroin than alcohol. That was one of the most profound things I had ever heard about when it comes to drugs itself.
Yeah,
and alcohol.
That surprises me, because when I think of heroin, I think of one of the worst of the worst. But, then I also think on the flip side, and we don't think about this because alcohol has been legal for so long and it's so ingrained in our culture. And honestly, the alcohol and tobacco lobby is probably one of the bigger reasons why pot is still illegal a lot of places. But alcohol is so ingrained in our culture, but we forget that it's poison. You know what I mean? Pure alcohol will kill you fast. And there's people who die of just drinking alcohol, not because it dehydrates you to a horrible degree, but because it's poison. And if you drink too much of it,
it pickles your liver.
Yeah, it'll just straight up kill you. And not only will it kill you, when I drink alcohol, and I haven't drank in a while, and I drink very sparingly, only when I'm out with the coolest of the dudes like Rock. But I have a good time, and I go out and I drink every once in a while. But when I drink and I've drank too much, I always wake up going, what the fuck was I thinking? And why did I drink so much? And I feel so horrible. I feel like I have been poisoned. And alcohol, when I drink, I'm a fairly confident person. I think if you're really, really confident and really humble, you can go out and have a good time. And if you monitor what you drink and you drink in moderation, you can be okay. I always rehydrate at the end of the night. But then I've seen the worst insecurities and the very, very worst in people just explode out of the shell that's been kept under the surface when they drink. And then you have people that are drinking and driving, and then you have people that are insecure in their manhood and they want to start fights with everybody. Mm-hmm. And the circle that I hang with isn't really like that. But if there's one little crack in your personality, alcohol will bring that out. It'll make it ugly, and at the end of the day, it'll kill you. You know what I mean? And so it boggles my mind. It makes sense to me why they tried to outlaw it. From a common sense standpoint, to outlaw somebody ingesting poison could kind of make sense more than a plant like marijuana, I guess. But it's at the end of the day, it is poison. So it's crazy to me how alcohol and a poison and something that kills so many every single day is just a part of American culture. And you watch an alcohol ad and it's, head for the Rockies and everything's awesome, and get trashed and partied up and have a good time, and that's perfectly fine. But a circle of nonviolent stoners sitting around destroying a Terminator pizza is the scourge of society, is the end of the world. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I would love to smoke one up right now. I would.
Let's
I don't
get
know
on a
so
bus
much.
and go to Colorado.
Yeah,
Let's go to Colorado and do some hiking.
Yeah, and pay some get Rocky Mountain High. Yeah.
There's going to be so much change.
For the trails.
Would you think there'd be a lot? I mean, I think of this from a corporation or a business sense. The change that's going to happen once, and it will happen once every state makes it legal. You know, because it stays in your system for so long. The testing is going to have to be so much different. So, because if you come into work and you damage a piece of equipment, or you damage a product, or you're just what your supervisor might think of as fucked up, and you go to do a drug test, how are you going to test that? I mean, things are going to have to change dramatically for that stuff.
I think personally that any employer should have the right to say, hey, if you want to work for us, just so you know, we're going to give you random urinalysis. Here's what we're testing for. We don't want people working for us who smoke pot, drink excess alcohol, or do heroin, or whatever that employer chooses to monitor his employees for. I think they have the right to make that decision. They're not bound by government laws of what's legal and what's illegal. If we're free people, then a free person who owns a business should be able to make those kinds of stipulations for employment at their own business. And on the same token, the employees are given this information up front and get to make the choice whether they do or do not want to work there.
Yep.
You know what? You're right. It's such a fine line, though, because you can see both sides. You can see how it could be taken to the extreme, because we take everything to fucking extremes. If you were to say, okay, hey, everybody, every drug is legal. There's nothing illegal right now. But there's going to be drug tests at every single job. So if you have a job, you're going to be drug tested. And if you pop hot, you don't have a job. I mean, that's another way to go about it.
Yeah, but if people choose, you know, if an employer like Rocky says has the right to choose, and I think they should have the right to choose whether to do urinalysis, because they're the employer. Their profit is dependent on the people that they hire, and they don't have a very good base of employees, because employees are avoiding that job because they test, and they hey, I want to smoke pot, or I want to drink a little bit here and there, or I want to do this. And there's this one employer, these three employers are half of the employers that test. Naturally, those employees or those potential employees are going to go, oh, you're going to discriminate on me because I want to drink a little bit on a Saturday night? Fuck you, I'm going to go work somewhere else. Those employers then are going to have to turn around and go, hey, we don't have the potential employee base. We're going to have to loosen ourselves up a little bit. And I think that's the way that the free market and the way that society is supposed to work. It's a checks and balances thing. But everybody should have, I think every employer should have the right to do that. I don't think a federal entity should get involved and say, hey, this is required. But if I'm an employer and I want to set a rule, I don't want people coming to hard drive drunk off their ass teaching people. It's a huge problem. It's a potential liability. Right. So I should have the right as an employer to make that decision. But conversely, the employee, the potential employee, should have the right to protest, non-verbally, and just say, hey, well, I'm not interested in your position, then you're an undesirable employer.
Right. I just think the testing itself would have to be modified, because if you smoke a joint, isn't it 2 weeks? Is it 2 weeks that it's in your system?
Month. Depends on the person, but yeah.
Yeah. It depends on body fat, a lot of
But it doesn't mean that you're high.
Right.
So you could totally smoke a joint. 2 weeks later, you go into work, you get popped for a piss test, and you hit hot, but you're not high. I'm just saying that the things that once I do think all the states are eventually going to legalize it or say it's okay. They are going to have to change how they test for people, because, like my position, there's no way that I cannot foresee any way that I could smoke a joint and after 2 weeks piss hot and be like, oh shit.
Yeah. Well,
I'm done.
My position, you can never do that either.
I think it's interesting that I'm going to be competing in California, and the state of California has extremely strict medicals, And a lot of times they test every athlete that competes there, and they consider marijuana a performance enhancing drug.
Really?
Yeah. And so if I went out there and I won my fight, and I pissed hot for marijuana, they could strip me of that win, and then they could ban me from competition for a year because I smoked a performance enhancing drug. Most people would go, to your point, and I was actually posed this question on Facebook when I was talking about the drug war and what a farce it is and all this stuff. Somebody said, well, what about driving under the influence? And I said, well, in a society where, driving really is not necessarily a right, it's a privilege, because you're operating a motor vehicle around, a lot of different citizens, some of which smoke, some of which don't smoke. In respect, you shouldn't be inebriated behind the wheel. If it's legal, that's a fair trade-off.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it's like, why do they consider it a performance enhancing drug? You know what I mean? When it comes to athletics. But then if you're talking about operating a motor vehicle,
shouldn't you be more enhanced?
You should be more alert. And I can tell you from the people that I've known that smoke, and they smoke every single day and they drive, they're not speeding. You know what I mean? They're paying real close attention to what's going on because they have a heightened sense of awareness. And I think that's why it's considered a performance enhancing drug. So I think a lot of people lump things like marijuana into things like alcohol, where there's a study that I heard of recently that said reaction time in driving in the study that they did for people that smoked pot irregularly or for the first time was decreased by a very, very small percentage. But regular users had absolutely no change in response time over normal people because they had a tolerance for it and they were more focused. So I think people lump these things together, but I don't think that's necessarily fair. But to your point, I also don't think it's necessarily fair to legalize it and say, hey, you can smoke and also operate this 2-ton vehicle around people that don't smoke, because they just might not be comfortable with that. And you have to be willing to, accept some give and take. If you're going to have a legalized pot or whatever the case may be, which I think it should be fully legalized, not even regulated, you might have to have a trade-off there. And to your point, an employer might have to have a more accurate method in determining, is this person high right now as we stand here? Is there a breathalyzer? Is there something that we can figure out? And that would be tough. But I'm sure the free market will.
Well, I mean, Joe Rogan speaks to that quite a bit, of saying that a lot of Brazilians who do jiu-jitsu get high before they
absolutely.
And I mean, and he talks about the pot that he smokes is more, it energizes him. It doesn't make him more relaxed and laid back. It gives him more vitality.
Increases his focus. Yeah, I'm sure.
But you and I were talking about this again before we hit the record button, about, oh god damn it kind of slipped my head. Slipped right out of my head.
You've been smoking?
Well, and see, my first thought was the Colorado thing is, I think you're allowed to have one plant, I think, is one of the deals. I don't know how that's taxed or how that's worked. That was my first thought. I was like, forget buying marijuana. I think I'll just have a plant. Just have a plant in your basement under an LED grow light. And when you need it, you just take what you want. Like you said, you're just growing it.
And that I think that's fair, but you know what? There's a lot of other people that won't do that. There's a lot of people that could grow tomatoes, and they'd rather just go buy them because they're lazy or they don't have the outfit for it, and that's fine. And in this case, they're taxing 30%, and I think in the first week they said they did like $5 million in business. If they're taxing at 30%, you're talking about $1 million going to schools and going to putting back into society instead of taking from society and paying for these people's incarcerations. I didn't know that you could grow your own plant in Colorado.
I think you can allow one plant.
I think that's fair, because there are people out there, and a lot of them, probably avid smokers, would take up the offer. But then there's these avid smokers that I saw in this news report that are driving around in this Hummer limo, taking tours together and having a great time, like people do on wine runs where they tour wine country,
bar crawls.
Why not?
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And what are you doing? You're contributing to these local businesses. You're contributing then back to your community, and you're eating a lot of food.
We are going to Colorado. That sounds like so much fun.
I remember where I was going to go. With this, with where the media, with how the media has changed our thoughts on all drugs, okay, how we think about marijuana. And I believe that marijuana became illegal back in the day because the cotton growers didn't want the competition with hemp. So they wanted to make it illegal. So that's how it started, and then it just kind of steamrolled from there. And now we're like, if everybody could smoke pot, we wouldn't have over-the-counter medications. We wouldn't have alcohol. It's such a challenger to all these other things that are legal that make a ton of money. But what you and I had talked about before we hit record was the idea or the YouTube message, the tweet that we got, which was a YouTube video of the Kiwis. I always forget. New Zealand. Thank you, God. Thank you, Todd, so much.
dates and countries.
I don't even know the date. It's January something.
15th.
Thank you. But they're giving MDMA to soldiers with PTSD.
The government is.
The government is. And now the United States government has been doing this with clinical trials, and the New Zealand government is resistant to do this, but they have a lot of people wanting to try this because it's helping the soldiers get over PTSD. Now, I'm so fucking brain screwed to think that if anybody were to get on TV and go, okay, let me get this straight. You want to give an hallucinogenic to somebody who has PTSD, somebody who's on a hair trigger. You want to give them a hallucinogenic? I would, immediately go, oh, fuck no. No. That sounds fucking crazy. Because I've been so schooled for all of my life that all drugs are so fucking terrible. But they're showing that MDMA is having an amazing result with soldiers that have PTSD. You know, it's one of those things that you almost can't trust what you've been indoctrinated with. Yeah. Because
not almost.
The more you understand, the more you read, and the more you know, it's just you've been given a false bill of goods. It's just that simple in too many areas.
Right.
And that might be your thought. That might be your initial response. That's crazy, but it's not your choice. You know what I mean? It should be their choice. These are soldiers that have sacrificed things for their country and ended up with this post-traumatic stress syndrome. It should be their choice whether they want to try this. You know what I mean? And who are we to really decide for them? We put them in the position, or not we, but you know, our representatives put them in the position that gave them this. If they want to try this to see if it helps, it's our decision, and our initial response to it doesn't really make any difference. In my opinion.
It's not even just tied to PTSD. In this video, and I'll have a link to it on the website or on YouTube, because fuck, we're on YouTube now also. It's a video that talks about children that have dealt with abuse, rape, any type of violence, people that have these memories that are associated with severe trauma in their lives. They're having these people take MDMA and then talk about those experiences and relive those experiences, because they say, I'm taking their word for it, these scientists, that it's creating new neural pathways in their brain so that when they do have these associations with these traumatic events, it's not linked with such pain.
Trauma. And then it allows you to separate from your ego. So you're no longer seeing of these things happening to me. They're more of these things happen to this person, and I can understand it and rationalize it in a more healthy way.
Deal with it more.
And I think that's the exact same thing that's happening with the post-traumatic stress disorder as well. But I mean, again, Graham Hancock was the one, I think, that the band TED Talk, have you seen that yet?
No.
He's a big psychotropic ayahuasca fan, because I think they're taking people down to Peru who have like heroin addictions, and they're doing ayahuasca trips, and they don't have withdrawals, they don't have any addictions anymore. And I just think it's again, the control of everything, or the idea that everything has to be controlled so that we can tax it and somebody has to make money off of it. When there's so many things that are, like you said, just a plant, just something that's natural in the environment.
Isn't it interesting that, you know, we know that pot is a non-lethal drug, but then the FDA wants to chemicalize it and patent it and make a ton of money off of it. And then it's okay. It's okay if a doctor says it's okay for you to take, like it's okay for the doctor to prescribe you these medications that have barely made it through FDA trials and then go on later to find out are horribly, you know, affecting people in horrible ways. All you have to do is do a little bit of research into it. But, you know, there's a documentary out there called DMT, the spirit molecule, which Joe Rogan does a forward on. And it talks about clinical trials of DMT, which is a naturally occurring molecular compound in every living thing on the planet. And the people that take concentrated DMT in these clinical trials experience a powerful hallucinogenic trip that they say is profoundly life-changing and centralizing of kind of their view of the world and of humanity, and it changes them basically forever in what they all say is an extremely positive way, and this is legal. It's an illegal substance, but if you go to South America and you drink the tea, you'll have this huge trip and it'll be a positive experience, and there's absolutely no coming down hard off of it. There's no real negative physical effects. It's a real soft thing. Since it's naturally occurring, it dissipates naturally, and you have a very soft landing, so to speak. But it's illegal, and you can't have it. And it's just like marijuana and other drugs listed as something that you can go to prison for. But if you say that you need it for religious reasons, you're perfectly fine. You can buy this bark online, and you can make your own tea, and you can have this trip. But it's illegal. If you don't believe, if you don't take a religious stance on it, it's illegal.
So we could start a church. The four of us could start a church.
Yeah, and there's actually a church in Florida that did, and they legally acquire this bark, and they trip out, and nobody dies from it, and they don't have they don't run out in public and shoot 20 people. You know what I mean? A lot of this has to do with the pharmaceutical industry.
Absolutely. And when you compare it to alcohol, I've told you before. I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but the way I feel when I am high compared to the way I feel when I'm intoxicated are so drastically different. One is a feeling, for me personally, one is a feeling of a kind of a little euphoric, lightheaded kind of feeling, but it probably doesn't affect me like it does other people, supposedly because I'm already mellow. That's what my wife said. When I'm drunk, it's like your body is trying to expel this poison and process this poison, so you feel out of it. It's a complete different feeling. And my assumption is that ayahuasca and some of these other things are going to be similar in the sense of your body absorbing something. It's like eating clean food. If you're going to put a poison in your body, that's something that's unhealthy for you, right? Don't get me wrong, I like beer. You would think that your body's going to process that differently than if you're inhaling a plant or you're ingesting a plant.
Well, and everybody's different too.
Right.
I know people that have smoked pot in the past to cure anxiety, to mellow them out, to bring them down. I know people that have smoked pot in the past that completely freak out and they have an anxiety attack because of it, and are like, hey, because of my psychological, physical makeup, it doesn't work for me. And I'm not going to smoke it because I don't like the paranoia that I get. I think a lot of the paranoia is probably derived from the fact that it's illegal. You have a heightened sense of awareness, and then when you hear a click at the door, you think the cops are about to break
in trouble. I'm in trouble. They're coming for me.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But, a lot of from what I've heard out of Colorado, a lot of the higher grade stuff that they have out there, the certain strains or whatever, that come with less paranoia. But the fact of the matter is, I've known people that have smoked what most would consider pretty decent marijuana, and they've had pretty bad anxiety attacks from it, and they've subsequently went, you know what, I don't think pot's bad, but it's not for me. It's not my thing. I'd rather have a beer. I'd rather drink a beer. If I can control it in moderation, that's fine. Anything in excess is bad. Food, cheeseburgers, French fries. I would argue pot in excess.
Don't forget sex.
Is detrimental. Not true.
I agree with
not true at all. Protected, of course, kids.
There you go.
But alcohol, tobacco, anything in excess is bad. Pharmaceuticals is no different. Aspirin kills thousands of people every year. Most people don't know that. You know what I mean? So anything can be abused, but that's a psychology. That's the psychology that needs to be dealt with. And Portugal's a great example of this. Decriminalized, what was it, Rock, like 10 or 15 years ago or something like that?
I think it was like 12 or 13, right in that range.
Yeah, and I think they did studies 5 to 10 years after the fact, and they saw half the overdoses. They started treating their quote-unquote former criminal, because they couldn't afford to incarcerate anymore.
Right.
They were going broke. And much to the United States and other countries' dismay, they decriminalized everything. Half the overdoses. Of course, crime went down because it didn't exist. They started treating these people not like criminals, but like patients. And so everything improved. Everything improved. And we still, as a country, rejected that model, even though common sense and logic dictated that it was the right direction to take. And I think a lot of it, just like everything, it all comes down to the mighty dollar. You have a pharmaceutical lobby, you have a private prison lobby. Law enforcement lobby is something that people don't think about. Just think about what's going to happen if we're incarcerating all these people. Then we're justifying the jobs of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of police officers across the country. If drugs are legalized, half of those police don't have anything to do, and police will lose their jobs. So there's a very, very strong lobby in the law enforcement community to say, hey, no, pot's still super bad.
I don't know many cops that are all about marijuana legalization.
No, because it's
seriously, I know a lot of cops too.
Yeah,
so.
and I know a lot of cops,
Yeah.
and I have some police that are friends, and I've talked to them, and they know that pot's not that bad, but they also know decriminalizing it or legalizing it is going to affect police jobs across the country. Now, is that bad? I don't want people to lose their jobs, but I don't want people to lose their lives either.
Right.
I talk to some cops who say, well, there's a lot of violence surrounding marijuana.
Yeah.
And you know, I try to make the point to them, well, that's because it's illegal.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Well, that kind of goes to you, Rock. When we talk about if we were to legalize marijuana, cops would lose their jobs, or there wouldn't be so many prisoners. So then prisons, would be completely reduced, and then the prison guards, and it's a tumbling effect. But you're a huge Ron Paul supporter, correct?
I agree with a lot of what he says.
And a lot of what he said was, let's get away with all these ridiculous groups of government.
Sure. He
Right?
he wanted to get rid of 5 of the major departments.
Okay.
Yeah, when he was campaigning in 2012.
But if we did that, realistically, even though we might want that, even though that might be what is best for this country, all of a sudden you say, gone. That group, gone. Department of Education, gone. This department, gone. All of a sudden you have thousands and thousands of people, no job. Where are they going to go?
You're falling into a fallacy that Henry Hazlitt called looking at just one side of every economic situation. Where did those jobs come
Holy
from?
shit. What did he just say? Say it again slowly.
gonna school
Say it
the
again.
shit
He's
out
gonna
of you. That's
gonna
what's
drop
happen.
the hammer on you.
Oh, fuck. I want this. I want this. This is what people want to hear.
Well, first of all, let's take a look at the nature of government, okay? Government doesn't produce anything. Anything government gets, it has to take from somewhere else. It has to take from the productive sector.
I'd agree.
In order to exist, right?
Yep.
So in order to do that, they're taking from the productive sector. So that sector, which produces things, now has less resources for which to produce stuff, which ultimately makes our lives better, right? Okay, so we're talking about 5 departments. Those people are, I don't know if Ron Paul actually advocated for getting rid of them very abruptly, or he talked about
I don't think he went.
off.
Yeah, I don't think he went into how he would get rid of these departments, but he definitely said we don't need these departments.
He had a plan. I think it was over the course of a few years.
Oh, did he?
I think-
Did he have a plan? Okay.
Through attrition. And think about what would happen to our current tax code if we got rid of 5 of those humongous departments. We were taxed at a very high rate in this country, of course. There's taxes on everything, from corporate tax to income tax to sales tax to you name it. If you slashed the federal government in half, or whatever percentage that would have been, if we were to get rid of those big 5 departments, imagine the taxes that they would be able, the tax relief that would be able to give to all Americans. And when Americans get money back in their pockets, they're able to save it. They're able to invest it. They're able to spend it. That's what grows an economy. So if you were to slowly get rid of these departments, then through attrition, the economy would start growing more productive jobs, because government jobs aren't productive. They don't produce anything.
No, they don't.
So you would have more resources freed up for the productive sector. So these people who are losing their jobs, more jobs in different, more productive areas of the economy would become available for them to absorb into if they were to do it slowly but surely. I do agree that if you do something very abruptly and put, let's say, 1 million people out of work, then you're going to have an immediate problem that will get solved eventually through the attrition and through the tax cuts and through the subsequent growth of the economy. They will get absorbed into the new growth.
But that's a hard sell. That's a really hard sell,
shit.
isn't it? To be able to say to the American people, you know what? Eventually, all you fuckers are not going to be employed by me.
Sure, that's why he talked about.
But magically, somewhere along the lines, there's going to be a job, and through slowly getting rid of you, you're going to get absorbed into the workplace.
It kind of comes back to the point of, if I take an extreme example, let's say we have a department of digging holes. This is an extreme example. you hire people, you take money out of the productive sector, you get taxation, and you give these people jobs, and you pay them to dig holes and fill them back up for no apparent reason. You just give them jobs, just to call them jobs. That's kind of the way I see the Department of Education and a lot of these other big departments. They're not constitutional. They don't do anything good for us.
I'm surprised Todd isn't freaking the fuck out right
They
now.
micromanage us from afar.
Okay. Yep.
It's what they do.
Yes.
And I'm comparing it to something very extreme. But what would you say to getting rid of that department of digging holes? Those poor people aren't going to have jobs no more. But the other end of that economic situation is we took resources which would have created jobs for other people in the productive sector. So whenever you tax something, whenever you take money, whenever you tax private citizens to create government jobs, there is another end of that economic equation that people can't see. Sure, you can see these new jobs that have been created, but what you don't see is the new jobs that could have come into existence that people don't pay attention to because they did not come into existence. It takes some deeper thinking to actually take a look at that.
And I'm not freaking out because I believe there's fraud and there's too big government. I mean, that's obvious to me.
You son of a bitch. When I bring up Department of Education in the past and I said we should get rid of that fucking thing because it gives you No Child Left Behind, which sounds great, but I've never heard a single fucking positive thing from any fucking teacher I've ever talked to. There's so much regulation. There's so much fucking testing. There's so much bullshit that kids can't even go to gym class anymore because they got to have X amount of reading or X amount of math, and they're fucking doing jumping jacks right next to their desk because they don't have any time for that shit.
Well, like what we know about the government is when the government creates jobs, you're talking about a centralized resource. You're not talking about a free market where people get to make decisions. Like in the example of education, if people get to make decisions on where their kids are going to school, and they get to pick this school over that school, and they have potentially maybe the increased financial resources to do so because we're not paying for a Department of Education, the free market allows education to excel. You know, it allows people to make choices based on what's better, and that makes competition between education, just like it makes competition between business. As soon as you start taking money from me and from you and from everybody else in this room and pumping it into a government job, which with any kind of government department 100% of the time is ineffective because of what Rocky just said. You're creating a job that essentially doesn't really need to exist in a free market. You're taking away ability from the people to progress, in my opinion. And so do we need all of this stuff? Not really. We just need vigilant citizens that, know kind of what the fuck's going on in their country and know that we don't need to be, it's funny to me, we fought a revolution from the British because they were taxing us 3%.
Oh, was it 3? I thought it was 2. Well, but it was very small.
Regardless,
very small.
Now, I talk to people about this analogy all the time. If the federal government was to come out and say, "Hey, we're going to switch things up in 2015. You're going to pay all your taxes starting January 1st until they're all done, till you get your 30, 33, 35% paid, and then you can have everything after that." From January to mid-March or to early April, what are you? You're a slave. You're not making any money. People are forcing you to give them money at gunpoint. If you don't pay your taxes, you go to prison. Okay? So we're paying 27% or more than what we were paying when we justified fighting for our own liberty and revolution. And we're paying a majority of that to fund an industrial complex that's drone bombing people in Yemen who are going to wedding parties, justifying wars that are killing millions of people on the premise of promoting democracy and all this other ridiculous bullshit, funding things like the Department of Education, which centralize education and treat every single kid in every single community and every single person as one centralized department sees they should be treated. It doesn't really promote any kind of free market system. It doesn't really promote any competition. It just goes, hey, everybody's the same, and everybody's not the same, and people should have the right to choose, and they should have the wealth to make those decisions on their own. Imagine how different the world would be today if 30 years ago the federal government said, hey, we're going to reform the tax code. We're going to make a mandatory sales tax. We're not going to take any income tax, and every year you get to dictate how this 15% in sales tax that you pay is allocated to these different things. Do you think people would be funding this huge industrial military complex? Probably not. You know what I mean? So these departments, they don't need to exist, in my opinion. I think Rocky might back me up on this. I think that the people in the free market are able to do that. When government intervenes, everything gets ineffective almost 100% of the time. I don't think there's any instance of government intervention or government programming, from Social Security to anything else, that ever ends up positive. Social Security being one example. People are going, oh, I'm not going to see my Social Security. You know what? I've been paying to Social Security and taxes for a long time. I'd be perfectly fine if the government said, you know what? We're ending this shit. We're not going to make people pay. You're never getting any of this, but we're going to pay some of the older people that have been counting on this. But guess what? The trade-off, Keoni, is now that you're 33, you don't have to pay for the next 30 years, and you get to keep all of that money and invest it how you see fit. I'm going to do a better fucking job, whether I'm sticking it in the mattress, whether I'm putting it in the bank, or whether I'm pumping it back into the economy. A hell of a lot better job than giving it to some bureaucrat that goes, oh, we're going to save it for your retirement. Kinda.
But now we got this war in Vietnam. We got to pull from that trust fund.
Exactly.
I mean, I would only trust that if there was never an example of congressmen dipping into that fund and using it for something else.
Absolutely.
If it was completely locked down.
Yeah, but it never is, though. The thing is, they can completely lock it down, but then they can completely unlock it with legislation. So anything that the government tells us it's going to do can always be changed. That's why you have politicians that get into office, and their goal is to be attached with these big sweeping legislations. All these regulations and all these new laws, to me, when I elect somebody to make sure that not very many laws get passed, because fundamentally we have our own liberties.
Grover Cleveland.
Yeah,
I learned something. Dude, I learned something from
He's
you.
the man.
But now you
Mr.
have politicians that are going, I want to be attached to this legislation and this legislation and this legislation. Every single law that's get passed means that somewhere, or somebody somewhere in the free market or individually on an individual basis is being more limited. And, you know, I elect people to prevent unjust laws from being passed. I don't elect people who want to put their name on a calling card piece of legislation that not only covers this thing, but that thing and this. The government is supposed to be small. The free market and the people are supposed to prosper, and that is not what's happening. We have a huge illusion of freedom and economic liberty in this country, when that's just not the case for most people.
When it comes to, I'm sorry, buddy.
No, mine's quick and easy. Then you can go. I was just gonna say, New Hampshire's House just approved the preliminary approval of legalizing recreational marijuana.
They're the
not medical, not medical, but just straight up, just like Colorado.
They're the freest state in the union, man. You don't even need a freaking permit to carry a weapon around there. You can just go buy a handgun.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Where?
Second Amendment.
Where?
New Hampshire.
Really?
New Hampshire is.
What's their motto? What's their motto?
Live free or die.
Live free or die.
They have this. There's an organization in New Hampshire called the Free State Project, where they actively go out and try to advertise to the nation how free they are compared to all the other 49 states, and they try to get libertarian, classical, liberal-minded people to come live in New Hampshire because they want to increase the population of like-minded thinkers.
I love it.
Yeah, I know. I want to move to New Hampshire. I've
They have
looked into
great.
Well, New
skiing and
Hampshire or
snowboarding there, too.
Canada.
Yeah.
New Hampshire or Canada. Those are now my two places that I would like to live.
But New Hampshire is also surrounded by a lot of states that are very opposite-minded. So if shit ever hit the fan, you're around a lot of
And
people.
they're very,
that wanna
very
take your
small.
shit. Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
New Hampshire. Sorry, I had a What About Bob moment.
That's in What About Bob? New Hampshire? New Hampshire?
Yeah, New Hampshire. Like I didn't figure that out. Want to keep Maine all to yourself, huh? God, what a good movie.
All right, whatever.
Yeah, Keoni made a good point about how government, when they don't pass things, that's when, you know, things are actually kind of seem to be improving a little bit. The best situation I think you can have politically, given the current environment, like I don't like Democrats or Republicans, but given the fact that we have a two-party system and it's not going to change anytime in the foreseeable future, best situation you can have is like a totally Democratic Congress and then a Republican president, so that way they're butting heads all the time and they're not able to pass anything. Because whenever they pass something, shit always gets worse.
See, I would not have had that view until I had listened to you speak. Because that it's been one of the most frustrating things during, you know, me watching Barack Obama, voting for him twice. I'll say it. Put me on the record. I fucking did it. I regret it.
That's probably why Clinton has such a good track record, because he had a Republican Congress for the majority of his term, if not the whole thing, if I remember correctly.
Thing, yeah.
So they were gridlocked the whole time. They couldn't pass much legislation. They couldn't waste our money.
Checks and balances.
Yeah, exactly.
But what has really angered me about this presidential timeline for Barack Obama has been the stupid feuding about stuff instead of looking at stuff that needs to either be. I would agree with you. I don't like when new laws come into effect. I would like it that people would get together and make common sense laws and repeal certain aspects of bills. You know, Todd and I talked about this when Occupy Wall Street. We wanted to understand Occupy Wall Street, and we thought that it was a colossal failure because
unorganized.
It was because it was unorganized.
There was no leader.
There was no leader.
Well, they weren't on the same page. There's some people with totally different points of view,
and they were completely mocked. And it was a very odd situation. It was weird in many different facets because you could look at it. What was going on at that timeline was Egypt was in rebellion, and they were throwing out their president. And we were supporting them. We were supporting them in the media. And then we have Occupy Wall Street at this exact same time, and we are making shit of these people who are trying to stand up and say, hey, I don't agree with this, whatever. Now, I really want to have somebody from the Occupy Wall Street movement, somebody who is somehow in the organizational aspect of it, a leader somewhat of trying to get people together and say, what did it really change? Because what it could have changed, what it could have done was had a ton of people together and said, this part of this bill, and be very specific, Patriot Act, this part of it is extremely un-American. Get rid of it. And this is what we're holding you to. Having congressmen or senators and say, here's the name, you voted for it, or you got this bill here, you promoted it, I'm calling you out on it. So either get rid of it or be known that you're the devil. And I really wish that was kind of what had happened during the Occupy Wall Street instead of a bunch of people getting together and going, yeah.
Well, they were focusing on Wall Street, not Washington. They should have, in my opinion, focused a lot of their attention where the real problem lies in Washington, D.C. They're the ones who make all this possible.
Well, Washington, D.C. does make it all does make a lot of it possible. Well, actually, it makes it all possible because they take away certain rules and regulations, and then all of a sudden Wall Street can do weird shit like back in the we talked about me watching the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, and when that movie came out, it was a movie about Wall Street. It was a movie about buying stocks and bonds in a company, and depending on whether or not that company was successful or not was how well the stocks did. But that's not the way it is anymore. You can buy a bunch of funds like from a bank and then say, I bet that these are fucking fail. You're betting on the failure of shit, and you're setting yourself up to profit off the failure of
bailout,
shit.
The promised bailout, is that what we're talking about?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
And because of the deregulation of Wall Street from the government, they were able to create certain schemes, and it just seems like almost like gangsters. It's almost like just betting at Vegas. Our Wall Street.
What I think happened with the Occupy Wall Street, and I'll just go from my father's point of view. He talked to me about, I think he went to the one in Iowa City. It's some group there, and he was talking about the way they communicate and how they have to communicate a certain way with certain like hand signals as a group. If people agree, they wave their hands a certain way, and yeah, exactly, like
Snapping.
silent. I don't have no idea exactly what it was, but he was talking about all these other things that was part of the way they were working as a group. I just kept sitting there going, that doesn't mean anything. Who fucking cares if they all clap together a certain way and there's no one leader and no one specific speaker and only a certain amount of people agree with it. I'm like, the whole idea was just muddled and didn't make any sense, and nothing happened. I mean, nothing happened.
If I can weigh in on it, the Occupy Wall Street, first of all, it was named something. It was labeled something. What we saw out of Occupy Wall Street I saw a lot of people on Occupy Wall Street that had their shit together, and they didn't necessarily say that they were with Occupy Wall Street. They were just out there trying. There's a video that me and Rock watched, and I know that he remembers what I'm talking about, of a guy out there that knew his shit economically, and he was dropping knowledge on everybody and screaming it out. And while he knew exactly what he was talking about and how economics was and how politics were corrupt and how all of the shit was going down, and people were listening and going and cheering him on, a lot of them probably had no idea what he was even talking about. So you had a mixture of a lot of different people in there. Some of which really know what they're talking about, and then a lot of people just showing up. A lot of people that you might have had people that were homeless that were just showing up to get on TV. You might have had people that were, hippies that were completely uneducated on issues, just showing up to go, yeah, fuck the system. You had a huge group of different people, but the problems that they had to talk about were so vast. There was no possible way, without leadership, that they could vocalize what their angst were. They pushed all of their frustrations and angst out on, the majority of them did, it seemed like, in the media, on money. And that's why they congregated around Wall Street. In my opinion, it shouldn't have been Occupy Wall Street. It should have been Occupy our country. It should have been people marching up to the White House and going, fuck this. We're done with this shit. Going up to Capitol Hill and saying, no. You guys are completely full of shit. You've been completely full of shit. The people in Wall Street are helping you be full of shit, and you're helping them be full of shit. The media is driving stock price now. You can, if I own the media, I can run a bad story on a company and watch their stock plummet, and then run a good story later after I've bought a shitload of that stock, and then sell it off and make a profit. And most people are like, the market's good. People don't have any fucking idea what's actually going on here. But we have a political problem. We have a corporate problem. We have a serious wealth disparity. And you had a lot of people that were educated and uneducated mixing together with no centralized leadership to say, hey, not only am I versed on what's wrong politically, I'm versed on how it's tied economically. I know what the Fed is doing, what the Federal Reserve Bank is doing. I know what these corporate interests and corporate lobbyists are doing and how they affect it. You had a bunch of people with a bunch of gripes, and some people didn't even know what their gripe was, showing up to get on TV. And then when you have a media that's controlled by very few people, it's very easy to demonize a movement and make it look stupid by going, look at this dumbass, and listen to him talk. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Well, 3 feet away, there's a guy that really knows what he's talking about, and the news doesn't really want to listen to that guy because he's telling it the way that it is.
And they can show the girl who's got no top on, who was walking around. I mean, that was the big one too. So it's just a bunch of hippies that are trying to be free love again.
Yep.
And
we have a society that has been dumbed down for decades. So whenever we have a society that likes Miley Cyrus more than it cares about a Syrian conflict and sending our troops into battle. You know what I mean? A society that cares more about what Justin Bieber is doing than why we're protecting opium fields in Afghanistan. So whenever you put a camera out there and you go look at our American Idol culture, you're going to have some really, really smart, intelligent people showing up trying to get a message out there, and then you're going to have some fucking idiots showing up trying to get attention, trying to get on TV going, woohoo, woohoo, woohoo. And who's going to focus on what, and what is our perception based on? Are we going to Occupy and going, hey, this is what's wrong with this? We need leadership here. I'm going to take the step. I'm going to educate you guys. We're going to actually implement change. Or are we watching TV going, look at these guys. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't even know what they're talking about. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a problem that now we have a populace, in my opinion, that's so ignorant and so dumbed down that the diamonds in the rough, like this protester that understand economics and banking and politics, is in the minority there, and he's being drowned out by the cheers of stupid people who, maybe like myself, I voted for Barack Obama based on his campaign promises in 08. Mm-hmm. Or was it 08? No, it was...
Yeah, it was 08.
Yeah, it was 08. Yeah. Then the next time around, I was savvy to that. I inspected what I expected, and within months, I knew he was full of shit. And so the next time around, I saw these people go, oh, Obama, he's still our savior, and Bush, he's still trying to cure Bush's evils. And to me, I'm going, what are you talking about? This guy is Bush. He already proved that 3-4 months into his candidacy. I've been paying attention. But he still had throngs of supporters that had no idea what was going on. And in this last election, I would openly call people out and say, hey, I voted for him the first time around based on this. He's done nothing. Why are you voting
I remember
for him
that
now?
in 2012. I followed his first term so closely. I was thinking to myself when 2012 came around, there's no way, there's no possible way he can get reelected, because the people who supported him have to see he's governed in the exact opposite way that
what
he
he said,
campaigned
that he campaigned,
for the reasons for which they loved him so much.
Right.
If I made the mistake of thinking the majority of people are actually principled, actually cared about what he said, when I really think most people actually just cared about his charisma and his almost empty slogans of hope, change, and the way he could public speak.
His public speaking. And we know of other countries that have fallen under the same spell of charismatic leaders. We're not going to name any names, but it's led to horrible, horrible shit because people don't inspect it. They're desperate. They want a leader. And so they elect somebody that sounds good and somebody that speaks well and somebody that makes a lot of good promises that sound great. What's interesting is I couldn't stand Bush. 9/11 went down. I knew the world changed. I knew it right there when I saw it. And I said, okay, here's what Bush needs to do to get rid of his dumbass persona. He needs to go get Osama bin Laden, if that's who's responsible for this attack, bring his head out on a stick, and he'll be a national hero. He didn't do that. And he tripped into wars that cost countless lives, that were built on faulty evidence. And so here comes the complete antithesis of Bush. A minority, charismatic, well-spoken leader that sounded very intelligent, and people were like, this is the anti-Bush. Of course he's the right guy. Let's get him in. This is change and everything is perfect. Well, we would later find out that Obama is basically an extension of Bush. Same policies, completely lied through his teeth in the 2008 campaign, was going to end all these wars, close Guantanamo, repeal the Patriot Act, didn't do any of that shit. Furthered a lot
Transparency.
of it. Yeah, transparency. Complete lack of that. There's a video going around on YouTube about how he's talking about how the government shouldn't have any kind of oversight on the people, and it shouldn't be looking into people's rights. And now, fast forward to 8 years, and these programs, people need to give up certain freedoms if they want to stay safe. Just completely full of shit.
That's why I was so flabbergasted when he got reelected by such a big margin. I was like, there's no way these people can still support him. He's done the opposite of everything they loved him for in 2008.
And when I couldn't stand Bush, it was because we were marching into war unnecessarily. It's because and the thing that pisses me off so much about the Democrats that I used to align myself with is they're, anti-war, and Bush is a tyrant, and he's a warmonger, and blah, 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 blah. Where are you now?
Right.
I don't hear you now. Your charismatic, well-spoken Nobel Peace Prize winner, full of shit motherfucker, okay, doesn't even deserve to be named with the people that should have gotten that prize. He's out there killing people in mass with drone strikes and with unjust wars and trying to justify military conflict in every direction. I don't hear your cries of peace anymore. I hear these people who are very, very adamant about peace when Bush was in office and elected Obama to deliver this message of peace, eerily silent about all of the killing that's going on, and now going, I don't know about that shit.
It'll become a big deal if we get a Republican president next time around.
You know what's interesting about us bringing up 9/11? Anonymous posted this today. 2,976 people died on 9/11. 2.5 million people died in wars justified by 9/11. 91.5 million people died from hunger since 9/11.
Yep. And when you think,
and $4 to $6 trillion in wealth spent.
I actually retweeted that.
Did you?
That very thing. But here's an interesting thing too. With the money that we spend on the military-industrial complex, or did I get that wrong? Industrial-military complex. Sorry, I've lost a lot of calories today. But with the money that we spend on that in these wars that are completely unjust, they're completely unjust. A lot of them, like the Iraq War, is built on bullshit evidence. We're talking about millions of people that died. We don't have to think about that in this country, but that's genocide. And as far as I'm concerned, if we go into a war unjustly and it leads to millions of people dying, and now Fallujah is being taken back over by Al Qaeda as we speak, that's genocide. The people don't want to throw around that term, but with the money spent on these military campaigns, we could abolish hunger completely. And there's enough food to go around. We're spending money to basically unjustly murder people while people are starving to death.
It's interesting that you say there's plenty of food to go around, because in other topics that we've talked about and that we're going to talk about on this podcast, we're going to have a lady on who wrote a book, America's Two-Headed Pig. And there's a subject recently that came out about how China, it's China, correct?
Yep.
Who they have such a population that they cannot provide eggs to their population, so they have to create a completely chemical cocktail, eggs and pork and meat. It's completely synthetic. Nothing at all is actually coming from the chicken.
From a 3D printer, or
they're taking chemicals and they're putting it in a vat.
A vat of
And they're like, okay, all this is going to be yolks, and all this is going to be egg whites, and then we're going to paint on a shell so that people can actually crack it and open it up. So it's interesting that you say that, we have plenty of food. That's the scary fucking thing. We have become so dumbed down. We don't truly know what all the facts are. We talk about, this lady at the Two-Headed Pig, she talks about how we should have free-range animals and all these idealistic views, and I think that she's correct. We shouldn't have huge barns that you have sows in or pigs.
Like industrial farming.
What's it called, though?
Commercialized farming, yeah.
What is it called, though, when you have a ton of pigs in one place?
Well, they have the sows like in cages where they can't move at all.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, but there's a certain term for that, and I was just blanking on what it was. But, I think about how much farmland do we truly have?
Yeah.
And do we really truly have? Because I'm too fucking stupid, and I'll admit it. I'm too dumbed down by my media and by my surroundings to know. Do we truly have enough farmland to have free range everything?
Absolutely.
And to actually feed everybody on this planet?
Well, it's gone back to what we talked about with her book. She says in the book that they are, because the GMOs in plants don't have the nutritional value that they need to have. Farmers have to farm more land for crops that don't have the nutritional value they have. Pig farmers have a certain amount of pigs when they're weaned off the sow die right away because they start right away on this corn that is not giving them the nutrition they need to start their lives off. And so you're having to have to have more yield on your farm to feed the animals, which of course need more feed because what you're feeding them doesn't have the nutritional value you need to. So if you started farming products that had the nutrition that they normally would have in the real world,
or to have
in nature,
with free range,
right? Then you wouldn't need to have that much. You would ultimately have the farmland you need to have to grow those crops.
Yeah, and think about we live in Iowa and we live in the Midwest, so when we drive along the countryside, we see these huge long fields.
I'm sorry, hog confinement centers. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Hog confinement centers.
We see these huge fields, these never-ending fields of corn and soybeans and stuff like that. There's this common misconception that that's food that people are eating, and it's not. The majority of the corn in the ag business now is set up to feed hogs and to feed livestock in these huge commercial, ridiculous hog and cattle farms. And they're feeding this completely nutritionless shit to these animals, which are then suffering from it, dying early, and then it's being fed to us. And a lot of it's pumped full of hormones, a lot of it's GMO related stuff that's essentially poison. And just speaking from personal experience, when I was a kid, I grew up and spent a lot of my time in Lamont, Iowa, which is about an hour north of here. When you drive up to Lamont, there was a few different communities around there that were thriving. They were in the downtrend at that point in time, about 20 years ago, but they were still thriving. They had these local economies that could justify grocery stores. They could justify maybe a small movie theater. They could justify a good small town community and environment. Slowly over the course of time, and I know this because I spoke with my grandfather about it and my dad about it at length, corporate farming syndicates came in and started buying up local farms. And there was this changing culture in rural America that in order to really be prosperous, a lot of kids needed to move to the city and go to college and get a good job there because farmland was starting to disappear and being consolidated. When this happened and there wasn't the small family farm, you started seeing tree lines and irrigation suffer from it because they were plowing everything down to just have fields and fields and fields and fields of crops. And the majority of this crop, a huge majority of it, is going to feed animals, which not people, but animals that people could then eat when people really need fiber and plant-based nutrition to stay healthy. And so it's an incredibly ineffective use of farmland, and it's detrimental to topsoil and erosion. So there's nothing positive about it. And then you add on the fact that you have companies like Monsanto that are suing small farms for using their seed a second year or reseeding their farms.
Well, you have farmers that that did not use any Monsanto seed at all, but because the wind picked up and blew the pollen from a farmer that had Monsanto seed over to a farmer who didn't have Monsanto seed, all of a sudden they have seed, or grain or produce that has Monsanto GMOs in it. Now they are obligated by law, because the judge ruled on it, they have to pay Monsanto.
Right, and Monsanto has a legal team, the capacity that a local farmer could never compete with. So local farmers are getting shut down. So we've seen in Lamont and around the area, Lamont, there's a convenience store. There's no grocery store. There's no local economy. The people, the bigger farmers and the corporate farmers that are out there now do you think they're going to go to buy all of their product from a local distributor? No, they're going to go to the city where it's cheaper because they can get it at a higher or a lower premium. And so these local rural communities are disappearing, and these corporate farming syndicates are taking over, and a lot of the shit that they're growing is not going to feed people. We could feed everybody on the planet if we really needed to, but a huge amount of this crop yield is going to feed animals, which are subpar, that are then subsequently going to feed people, and it's subpar meat. Imagine if we would have these huge, giant, sweeping, fields full of spinach and lettuce and a diverse array of crops. We'd have plenty of food for everybody, but we're not. We're feeding animals to feed to people.
And we're also using it for fuel. That's the other big piece is ethanol. Ethanol is another big one.
There was that same, was it the same kiwi? What is the
New Zealand?
New Zealand, thank you. God, I don't know why I'm blanking on New Zealand. It's so hard with New Zealand.
Yeah.
But there was a how it works video that I was watching, and they were talking about clean energy and what New Zealand is doing. This whole how it works thing was basically based out of New Zealand. It had everything to do with them. But instead of corn now, they're using trees. They found a way to plant trees and a certain type of tree, a pine, that is so quick growing and it produces so much more sugar than corn that they're hoping to get away from having to pay farmers to grow corn for gasoline and whatnot. So I thought that was really interesting that you would figure out a way to destroy trees now instead of corn. And what would our farmers do if we weren't planting corn? Would we plant spinach and kale and everything like that?
Be what the market demanded.
Well, and now there's a demand for organic food, but in America we eat so much meat, and a lot of the countries outside of America won't even allow our meat outside of our borders. They won't even accept it because it's shit. It's shit, and it's full of shit, and it's full of hormones. But I think there's a growing demand for this stuff, but what it all comes down to is the almighty dollar. And while I've watched Lamont die, and I've watched all of these local farming houses kind of just been torn down and replaced with these sweeping fields, in 2008 when we had a lot of rain, what happened was, because there were no tree breaks, because there were no crop breaks and irrigation to get water away, all this huge torrential rainfall when we bought this property down there all congregated in a bowl, which is Lamont, and completely decimated the entire town with floodwater. And there were tons and tons of corn stalks all over the town, like sometimes 3 or 4 feet thick from all of this. So we knew how this happened. These farmhouses and all these fields, they weren't flooded out. All of that water had just flooded directly in here because it had just been over-farmed. So there are far-reaching effects to this, but there's a demand for organic food now that could be easily sustained with the amount of agricultural space that we have. But there's this culture now of fast food in the dollar menu that keeps meat production up. And how much sense does it make to grow huge amounts of food when there's people starving to death, to grow huge amounts of food to feed to animals, to feed to people who already have enough food?
Right.
It just doesn't make
I
sense.
think they say that there's a lot of like 5-acre organic farms that do a wide variety of produce that they make a substantial living, and they only have 5 acres,
Right.
and it goes year round.
I actually have 2 relatives that farm, and I was going to bring this up when we have the lady on from Two Headed Pigs, but my cousins who farm, they say if you're not big enough, if you're not selling X amount of seed, or I'm sorry, X amount of produce, these people won't even deal with you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have X amount, which means there are no options for small farmers, and the only option, if there is one, is the organic route. And then you got to really hope and pray that the community that you live in has enough money to pay for the organic route, and that they actually give a shit about organic food.
Yeah, and then we're not even talking yet about, we want to talk about welfare and the government and handouts. Agriculture gets some of the biggest subsidies in the country, and those are free handouts. And I know farmers around the Lamont area that produce fine yields. They use GMO crop seed, and they do perfectly well in their income, and they're getting subsidized by the federal government every single year with taxpayer dollars. Whether they produce or not doesn't really matter. They're getting paid, to do what they do, and they're making a killing off of it. So it's not like if a farmer has a bad year, he's really, he's going to have to save and be conservative. He's getting a check regard.
Well, that's the bad part. You have those bad apples. You have those people that think, this is just the way things are. It's legal. In fact, the government's giving me the money for it. And we associate that with every farmer.
Sure.
We say blanket statements like, well, farmers, they all have money. All farmers are rich. My cousins are not rich.
Yeah,
and my brother-in-law is not rich, and they're following the paths of all these other farmers because that's what they're being indoctrinated with.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the path you go with because this is what the latest and greatest scientific studies are showing. And that's not what we are hearing in documentaries and what we hear in internet media, because you're not going to hear it in regular media.
Well, so, what we can see regardless is the small family farm is dying.
For sure.
And it's nearly dead. Corporate farming has almost swallowed it up. And when it comes down to money and interests like Monsanto, they're not looking out for our best interests.
What was that movie with? Michael Crichton with who's the guy from
Inside Job?
No, Michael Crichton. No, it's not Michael Crichton. There's a movie called Michael something or other with he used to be on ER. Now he's best friends with Brad Pitt from Ocean's 11. What's that freaking actor's name? Yeah, George Clooney. And it was a story about I believe it was a corporation that owned, like Monsanto, that owned a crop, and then they found out that it poisoned the water, and they tried to find a way to pay off these people so they didn't have the lawsuit come in. He's kind of like the closer. He comes in and fix all these problems for these corporations, and they jump the gun and end up trying to take him out because he found out that they were honestly trying to screw these people out of a living or out of their lives. I think somebody had died from this contamination. And so it was a really, really good movie because it just showed that the kind of wealth we can't, it's hard to fathom the kind of wealth that some of these corporations have, so that they really feel that they're impenetrable. And so, part of the movie, they hire these 2 guys to kill this guy, and they do it all very scientifically.
I think it is Michael Crichton.
Michael Crichton's the author of Jurassic Park.
Matt Damon's the star, right? I thought Matt Damon was the star. I don't.
Well, he's in Gas. Is he in Gasland? No.
Yeah, he is.
He is in Gasland?
Yep.
Well, I wonder who the closer is for the spill is it West Virginia?
Yeah.
That chemical spill that is just up. The sick fucking thing is I get this information from the Comedy Central. I'm getting this shit from Comedy fucking Central. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart has to educate me on the fact that thousands of people can't drink their drinking water. What would happen? Rock, what would happen if Cedar Rapids all of a sudden, hey man, you can't no water. Everybody, hey, we're just putting out an announcement.
The Cedar
Don't
River's
drink any
polluted.
fucking water.
Katrina.
You can't cook.
People would raid every store that sold bottled water.
And then once that bottled water was gone, then what?
People would kill you for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is happening to a huge portion. 9
counties all around was it Trail Fox River? I can't remember. Sorry, I can't remember the exact one.
Well, and people talk about, the quote unquote conspiracy nut jobs that are talking about what happens if there's an economic collapse. Take a look. You know what I mean? People panic. People make stupid decisions. And people are completely reliant on an infrastructure that provides them with now water. You know what I mean? Water and food, just basic necessities. And an interesting thing about, agriculture and the Great Depression statistic I heard was when the Great Depression happened, 90% of rural communities were self-sufficient. And so they could fall back on their own communities locally to survive. And it was a scrape sometimes.
And they were still... And
it was tough, but they were able to survive in harsh conditions and just barely scrape by. 10% weren't self-sufficient and they suffered and some people perished. Now that's flip. Now that's 90% of people are completely reliant on a food and water infrastructure, and 10% are self-sufficient, which most people would go, oh man, that's a huge number. But the problem with that is 90% used to be the majority. So if the 10% didn't have anything and they didn't have any means for self-sufficiency, they were still the minority. There's no way they could push over the 90%. Now it's the flip side. 90% are completely out of control of where they get their food and water. So if shit really, we always talk about, quote unquote shit hitting the fan. Mm-hmm. If the shit hits the fan, it's not going to be like the Great Depression. It's going to be like Katrina nationwide. And people go, oh, that could never happen in this country. Tell me why. Tell me why if the economy collapses.
I think it's actually happened down in West Virginia, but my wife gives me such a fucking hard time about me talking to her about prepping at all.
Yeah.
Did anybody in West Virginia think, oh, this could happen? All my fucking water's gone.
Well, I think the Daily Show did a good job of showing all these people on different news shows talking about Al Qaeda's next or a terrorist attack on our water source, and then he's like,
no, this wasn't Al Qaeda.
Here it is. But he's saying that here it is. I mean, it's already within our own borders that we're not taking care of things enough that a company can leave a cinder block in front of a hole and hope that it stays plugged.
Listen, don't say we need more restrictions and oversight because Rock might freak out and punch you lovingly. We cannot have more oversight on corporations.
No, government's never the answer. That's my opinion.
I was going to say, hey, Michael Clayton.
Michael Clayton
is that name of that movie. Yeah. It's really, really good. Scary, though.
All right. Hey, you know what? It's actually getting kind of fucking late.
It's always late with these two. Jesus, God
we
almighty.
Could keep on going, but I got another training session I got to do at 11 o'clock.
Are you shitting me?
No, I'm not. I promised somebody who took a class for me I'd roll with them, so I'm going to head back to the gym here in a minute.
Sweet.
God. I have a wrestling mat.
Yeah, well, unless you got a jock and a lot of willpower.
I do have a jock. I have a nut cup, but I have 0 willpower.
Strap it on.
And I have really poor cardio.
We'll work on it. You got to start from the bottom.
You know what? I've been wanting to come by the gym. Hard Drive, MMA, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. When would be a good time? When would be a good time to come out and roll around with Rock? So
Saturday we have open gym at noon to 4.
Noon to 4.
Yeah, Rock's a handful, so I don't know.
He's gonna fucking destroy me.
He's no joke, man. I'll tell you that.
By the way, I rolled with this bonehead. And he just starts fucking because we don't roll. I don't roll with grown adults.
No,
anymore.
I'm going to stop you right there. He's going to show me something, and I'm totally unprepared. So I lay down on my back.
I'm going to talk about the nut cup.
Yeah, he lays down on top of me, and something pokes me in the belly button.
Yeah,
it's extremely uncomfortable. I have no idea what's going on. So I push him up off of me. I'm like, what is poking me in the belly button? He goes, I have a nut cup on, and I was like, okay, now I'm okay. Because I didn't know before what was poking me in the belly button.
Because I've only had 6 kids jamming their knees in my balls.
You thought it might be a boner.
I thought something was a little off, and I just want to make sure. I felt extremely uncomfortable, and I was just making sure.
The church says no.
That's right. Didn't our Bible study tell you anything?
We actually use, the majority of people and the guys use steel cups. So when they get in like mount or back mount and they really want to put that pressure in, it's I call it a dick dagger because that's what it feels like.
Ow.
It does not
Steel.
feel good. It
Where
can
the
be a
fuck do you
weapon.
get
Why would you want a steel cup?
I don't have one.
You get them from Thailand, and in Thailand they have a national sport, Muay Thai, and it's a lot of knees, a lot of elbows, a lot of kicks. So if you don't have steel protecting your nuts, you're gonna feel it. The American cups that they use for football are a little bit narrow. You don't want to take a knee or a rounded knee to the nuts in one of those things.
All right,
Because those things only are really trying to help deflect things.
Right.
Football cups, they don't really.
Yeah,
So-
they're not meant for impacts straight to your nuts.
So if someone's going to show up to Hard Drive MMA, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is, I haven't been there yet, but I'm assuming it's fucking amazing. But once I go there, I will be telling you it's fucking amazing. What would you suggest? What do I need to have? School me. What do I need to have? I'm going to show up. I'm going to roll around.
Shorts, a nut cup, just for preventative measures. A mouth guard and a t-shirt, and that's it. We're real casual. We obviously expect a high degree of respect and humility. We always tell people to leave their ego at the door, but we always start people at fundamental levels. We're trying to build you from the bottom up. So even though we tell you to come in with a nut cup and a mouth guard, the chances are you're probably not going to need that. You're not going to be taking a lot of impact. But when you're rolling around, you can twist a certain way. Your elbow can fly up and hit somebody in the chin. It's just good practice to get used to the mouth guard and get used to the nut cup. But we don't. It used to be kind of throwing people into the lion's den. We were a team of people that, 15 to 20 competitors that just got together twice a week and beat the shit out of each other. And that's, it was a great way to prepare for a fight. But when you had somebody that's like, hey, I want to join, it was like, hey, you have no idea what you're getting into. And when somebody could stay for 2 weeks, we would go, okay, we'll teach you some things. But I'm not kidding you. Literally, 95 to 98% of the people that came in there never came back after the first day because it was a meat grinder. And we didn't have the tolerance or the patience to teach you. You needed to basically earn our respect and let us know that you were in it for the long haul. Now it's a school. You know what I mean? Now we're trying to teach people, and we have people coming in there that are just interested. They're not interested in competing. They're just interested in learning martial arts. Maybe they want to defend themselves. Maybe they think they want to learn how to defend themselves, and then 6 months later, they're rolling with somebody like me, and they're doing better, and they go, wow, I could compete. But the gist of it is it's a huge family. It's just a bunch of people that care a lot about each other, respect each other, and want to make themselves better. And I've told a couple people this, and Rocky's rolled with us, quite a few times, and he's been a lot more active lately. If you do jiu-jitsu, or if you do kickboxing, or you do MMA, or you train for 6 months, it'll change your whole life. If you go in there and you do it a few times, it'll change your perspective. But if you do it enough to become proficient and go from a place where you're getting choked out and twisted and just dominated to a point where those same people that used to do that to you can't do it, and you're defending yourself against them, it changes your psychological framework in a way that I can't really describe until you actually do it. But it's extremely positive, and it puts you in a place of humility and caring that I don't think you can get there until you've been humbled on the mat.
That's one of the things that I love about the idea of jiu-jitsu and listening to the Gracies and watching a lot of. I'm one of those dorks that watches a lot of YouTube, and I get a lot of my information from YouTube, but. When they talk about dealing with bully-proofing your kids, and what would you want for your kids? I want my kids to be able to go to school and feel confident.
Right.
Not that they're going to hurt anybody. And they talk about just neutralizing the bully, which I love about jiu-jitsu. I love the idea of I'm just going to roll, and I'm totally safe, and I'm...
Yeah, it's not about, in that, when you're thinking about it from that aspect, like if I'm putting myself in that position, it's not about walking into school and going, I'm the baddest motherfucker in here. Right. I'm going to kick everybody's ass. It's going into school and walking around and letting people know by the way you carry yourself, by the way you handle yourself, that you're a very kind and caring and respectful person, but people don't want to step on you. They don't want to tread on you. And when you get confident in jiu-jitsu, or you get confident in kickboxing or MMA, or you go through that experience, you don't have to, speak loudly to carry a big stick. When we go out to the bars, if most guys go out, 2-3 guys go out, they might run into 2 or 3 guys that are going to give them a hassle if they're being dicks, or they're drunk, or they're belligerent. Every time I've ever went out to the bars with my friends in a group of 5 to 10 guys, the way that we carry ourselves isn't necessarily outwardly aggressive, but we always have like a cushion of 5 to 10 feet all around us from every other person in the bar. We've never had any fights ever break out whenever we're around, and I think it's because people can pick up on nonverbal cues of confidence, and so you can diffuse a lot of situations before they ever would even consider them to be, a situation or something like that. So you protect yourself without even knowing it because of the way that you carry yourself and the confidence that you walk with. So you don't have to walk out there with your chin up in the air and walk around like you're this badass. People almost can feel it. You know what I mean? And when they can feel that you're capable, but then they see that you have the humility that you don't have to advertise it, then they go, I want that. I want to be able to know that I can handle myself, but not have to project that. Because even when I get into the cage and I compete, when I see somebody huffing and puffing and giving me a mean face, I know that there is a little bit of psychological weakness. They might be a dangerous competitor, but they have to project that energy of anger towards me. And somebody who really believes in themselves, do they need to? Does a Fedor or does a BJ Penn really need to sell me on the idea that they're the meanest guy in the block? No, they're going to show me. They believe in it. You know what I mean? So it's a level of confidence in us, and a level of just self-respect, and just I can't say enough about it. If you do it for 6 months, it'll change your life. I had a guy, Dennis, come in, Dennis Fertella, who he got a hold of me and he was like, man, I'm kind of intimidated. I'm going to be honest. I never thought I'd be able to do something like this, kind of talk me into it. And I took the time and I wrote him a big, long email. And I said, look, it's not that bad. Here's some of the misconceptions. Here's what we would do. Come in, try it out, give it 6 months. It'll change your life. And it did, and he came back to me later and said, Coach, I can't believe. I went back and I read that email and everything you said was true. And I really feel a complete different sense of myself now. He went on to compete once. He took one fight. And won. He trained, put in a 2-month camp and won, and never really had any aspirations to fight after that, but it changed him forever, and it's a really powerful thing for somebody to come in there and go, fighting, wow, this is completely out of my element. But then to learn that anybody can do it if they just have the willpower, it empowers you in ways that a lot of other things just simply can't do.
That's amazing.
Interesting.
Hey, thank you guys very much for showing up tonight.
Once again.
Rock,
Thanks for having us.
I miss you, pal.
Yeah,
Get Rock on here, man. He'll school you.
The phone works both ways.
Yeah.
All right. I apologize. That's my fault. I need to call you more often.
That's all good.
Hey, and everybody listen to us out there. January 24th, 2014, watch Keoni Koch fight Brian
T-City.
Yeah, T-City Ortega. Okay, Keoni, what's your fight name?
Evil Genius.
Keoni Evil Genius.
Yeah. Wait for the walkout, right? That's what we're going to be looking for.
Hopefully by the time you hear this podcast, I'll have a belt in my hands. But
Sweet.
If I get my ass kicked, then,
We know you tried your best.
Yeah, but let's be honest, that's not going to happen. If it does, though, that doesn't mean I'm not smart and I don't have good opinions, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
That's all that matters.
Hey, and if you want to check out Keoni, it's harddrivemma.com.
Yep.
That's awesome. And he does Facebook and Twitter and right?
I talk a lot of shit about the government. You can probably call the NSA and they'll get my direct contact information.
And Todd, how can people follow us?
The Facebook.com. It's a wonderful product. Social media is an incredible news source that we are trying to use. So you can go to the Primal Scream podcast on Facebook. Also go to our website, theprimalscream.org. On there, you can link to Facebook, like us on that. You can follow us on Twitter. We're trying to throw a lot of different tweets out there, so we're not taking just one opinion and one point of view at the world that's going on around us. Stitcher, iTunes, subscribe, follow us, and we'll help you rock and roll.
And the latest thing is YouTube. So I'm getting all the podcasts on YouTube to make it as easy as possible for people to listen to it, and who knows, maybe eventually we'll go into some video podcasting also. But if
Matt's willing to take on that task of editing something like that, God bless you. I don't think it's worth the trouble.
If we do, all right. Well, thank you everybody for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
I really appreciate it. All right. Well, I'm Matt,
and I'm Todd.
We'll see you later.
Adios.
Good night.